officials now, or officers now, from the Special Broadcasting Service. Thank you for your attendance here today. If I might welcome Ms Jane Palfreyman, the Acting Managing Director, and your colleagues appearing by video conference. Do you wish to make an opening statement?
I do, Chair. With your blessing, it is brief.
That is wonderful to hear. Please go for it.
Thank you. As committee members will appreciate, Australia is experiencing demographic, cultural and technological change. Population growth, diversification, fragmentation of the media ecosystem and the rise of AI are reshaping how Australians engage with media, culture and public institutions. For national broadcasters like SBS, this has direct implications for how our services are delivered and requires ongoing review of our organisational presence and capability to drive three outcomes: relevance, accessibility and effectiveness. SBS last year marked 50 years as the national broadcaster established to ensure that culturally and linguistically diverse communities are informed, represented and connected to Australia's civic life. Importantly, we're established in service of all Australians. That responsibility remains central to SBS's role and always informs how our organisation operates. Considering the current environment of uncertainty, growing social tension and declining trust, SBS's role is practical, but it's also increasingly essential to provide trustworthy, impartial and responsive information through our news, audio, factual and scripted content across SBS services and platforms, to reflect the lived experiences of contemporary Australia in a way that contributes meaningfully to the national conversation, and to support community cohesion by helping Australians stay informed, see each other clearly and, we hope, to find common ground. In other words, our work has never been more meaningful or relevant to the challenges and opportunities faced by our community. I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you. I will pass the call now to Senator Faruqi.
Thank you very much and good afternoon, everyone. I might start off with some questions on Eurovision. The United Nations Special Commission of Inquiry has found that Israel is committing genocide in Gaza. Countries across Europe, including Iceland, Ireland, Spain, the Netherlands and Slovenia, are now boycotting Eurovision because they refuse to normalize a state responsible for the mass killing and starvation of Palestinians. So my question is, why is SBS, given all of this, why is SBS still planning to beam Israel into Australian living rooms, as if none of this matters? And what does, I know we had a long conversation last time about impartiality. What does SBS think its impartiality means in the face of a genocide?
Senator, SBS has a long history of broadcasting Eurovision. It is an event, a music event designed to bring culture and community together through song. If SBS were to withdraw from Eurovision, that would be seen as taking a position, and as such, to be taking a position would bring into question our impartiality. Our impartiality, our balance is the cornerstone of who we are, and as such, that's a position we can't undermine by being seen to take a position.
So you think supporting a nation committing a genocide by beaming them into our living rooms is impartial?
Senator, SBS is
the exact opposite.
Sorry, my apologies.
It's the exact opposite of impartial.
Senator, SBS's broadcast of Eurovision it's as I said, it's a music contest. Yes, we're aware there are some broadcasters who have withdrawn. There are also more than 30 broadcasters who are participating in the event, including BBC UK, Denmark, France. It is a celebration of music. It is designed to bring people together. The EBU has recently, in fact, strengthened its rules to ensure that Eurovision remains a neutral space.
Sorry, who has strengthened its rules? I missed that.
The EBU, the organisers of the event, have recently, late last year, strengthened their rules.
So are you kind of implying that Iceland, Ireland, Spain, the Netherlands and Slovenia are not impartial?
Senator, that's not the position I'm taking. As I said, we respect the views of communities and broadcasters. We've had to make a decision based on our long history of broadcasting the event that if we were to withdraw, that would be seen as us taking a position. To do that would undermine that impartiality that is enshrined in the Act and in our Code of Practice.
During estimates hearings in October, I asked you about SBS staff not being allowed to use the term Palestine, and they were instead required to refer to occupied Palestinian territories. And at the time, the Sydney Morning Herald reported that other terms such as genocide are strictly but unofficially still not permitted in most circumstances except in direct quotes. And when I asked about the guidelines, you said that SBS was in a transition period and that you would expect to continue to evolve within the next few months. So now it has been a few months, and the SBS News website heading is still Israel-Palestinian Territories Conflict News. Are your journalists still being told that they cannot call Palestine Palestine?
Senator, I have Ms Wicks here who can talk you through the detail on that issue.
Thank you, Senator. Firstly, I would say that the editorial guidance at that time was absolutely that we asked of our journalists to refer to the context of the decision made by the government. That is, we refer to the occupied Palestinian territories, which is correct, but we have asked journalists, as we did at that time, to also acknowledge that Australia now recognises Palestine. So that's the guidance that was issued. Unfortunately, it was misreported at the time, and we did issue a clarification. Having said that, you're absolutely right in that the guidance that has been issued around this for the last couple of years has always acknowledged that the language would evolve over time. So we have taken the time, I particularly have taken the time to talk to each of our news and current affairs teams in the past couple of months to seek their feedback on, the guidance that we have issued now, insights and feedback that they might want to pass on to us, questions about editorial guidance process to which they can contribute anonymously or otherwise. And indeed, when we reviewed our editorial guidance during the past couple of years, most of that guidance was issued after questions from journalists. So we've done that work, we've gathered that work, and I'm now in discussions with the head of our codes and guidelines and liaising with the key editorial leaders across SBS. So we took the time to basically stop down and discuss with all our news and current affairs teams and seek their feedback with a view that we will evolve this language over time. As you note, SBS is editorially independent of government.
Sorry, I'm just flabbergasted. I don't even know what to say. Like, how many months do you need of consultation when the Australian government has accepted and recognised Palestine as a state to allow your journalists to call Palestine Palestine? But I will move on. Are your journalists still being told to tiptoe around the word genocide as well? Or can they call a genocide a genocide?
We certainly refer and use the word genocide, and we attribute that term to the person or the organisation who is saying it.
Sorry, you refer that term to?
We attribute the term to the person or the organisation that is using that term, definitely.
So, but SBS itself does not call Israel's genocide a genocide in reporting. You attribute it to the people who are saying it.
We do use it in our reporting, and then we do attribute it to the organisation who is stating it.
Okay, just a final few questions, Chair. I think it was last year when you launched with the University of Canberra a report titled New Research on Sense of Belonging and Media Representation Among Multicultural Audiences in Australia. And I think you launched it in Parliament in November 2025. Yep.
Yes.
And I think, yeah, okay. And you shared research, or SBS shared research on representation in Australian news in general, but multilingual communities as well. And you reported that Arabic speakers felt the least represented, as well as specific to SBS representation. Your survey showed that Arabic-speaking people reported the second lowest representation in terms of both fairness and coverage. And my office at that time queried whoever from SBS was presenting that report on the question of why Arabic people aren't feeling represented by news coverage. And the response to that was, we don't know why Arabic people aren't feeling represented by our news coverage. Do you know why Arabic people aren't feeling represented by your news coverage?
Thanks for the question, Senator. I think that research that you're referring to was to draw out the link between representation, as you say, in news and in media more generally, and how that links to belonging, to civic participation, to a raft of measures that allow different communities to feel at home in this country. To your question on the why, that research, I think, was more about making the point around representation links to feeling heard, feeling seen, and therefore to an inclusive society. I don't have that specific detail in front of me, but it was more about drawing the link, the importance of representation, the importance of being represented across the news, but across all media. And
It actually wasn't just across all media, it was specifically SBS representation as well. There was no answer provided, but my office was told that they do try and answer this question for other communities, but they just didn't have a response for Arabic communities. So maybe you could take this on notice and, and provide an answer if you have one.
Yes,
thank you. And what steps you might have taken to then ensure that Arabic communities do feel represented. Mm-hmm. Yep, thank you.
Thank you, we'll do that.
Thank you, Senator Faruqi. Senator Henderson.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good evening to you all. Our apologies for keeping you so late in the day. Look, I just want to ask you some quick questions on expenditure on hospitality and functions. I have a copy of the Quan SQ25 002281, which the department has provided a group dancer on behalf of a number of agencies. The SBS functions are from page 10 through to page 14. There are 19 functions in total across the 2025 calendar year up until the 25th of September. Did you have any additional events from the 25th of September through to the 31st of December? And if so, what were the cost and nature of those events?
Senator, off the top of my head, I can't bring that information to bear. I'm happy to provide that to you on notice if helpful. I don't have that in front of me.
All right. If you could provide it on notice, I would be grateful. And also any events held this year as well. Mm-hmm. So I just want to work through some of those events because when I tallied them up for the first 9 months of 25, SBS spent $768,000 on these functions, which is a substantial amount of money, particularly when you are funded by the taxpayer, albeit I understand you raise some commercial revenue. But as a public broadcaster, I am obviously concerned. So can you explain what the Tour de SBS function is?
I can, Senator. As you've referenced, part of our organisation generates commercial revenue, which allows us to invest that into content and services. The Tour de SBS is an event to engage the advertising community who generate that revenue to better understand the Tour de France being a tentpole piece of content in our schedule and one that generates substantial advertising revenue, and that event is to engage that cohort.
So we're talking about venue hire of 18,000, catering 21, AV and production 19,000. Yeah, I'm talking in general terms. Activities 13,000, photographer $525. The agency fee 20,000, prizes 2.5. The MC was 4,300. Who MC'd the function?
Well, Senator, I can't recall off the top of my head. It's usually personalities who are aligned to the piece of content. In this example, it would be cycling. As you've mentioned, the ability to generate revenue relies on us informing and educating our advertising agencies and clients on these events. It is part of doing business in the commercial landscape, and this event is part of that.
Why would you be paying an agency fee of $20,000?
Senator, I believe that's, again, I don't have that in front of me, but I believe that fee would be the assistance of a company to help us organise and orchestrate that event.
Well, that is an enormous commission or fee. I mean, some of these, could you please come back and explain the nature of each of these costs? Why wouldn't you have one of your SBS presenters be emceeing this at no charge?
Senator, not all of our SBS presenters are on long-term contract with us, and they're engaged for moments across our schedule, but I'm happy to take it on notice and come back to you.
So how many people attended this event?
I don't have that number in front of me. I would think in Sydney the numbers would be circa 100 and 150 agency and clients, but again I can confirm that on notice.
Yeah, these costs look very disproportionate. So this was just a one-day marketing exercise?
It was an evening event, Senator.
An evening event. And what is Hoops Capital East? Is that a restaurant?
Again, Senator, I don't have that detail in front of me. That may well be catering, but I'm happy to confirm that on notice for you.
And what's the charge denoted by the description activities of $13,228?
Senator, again, I'll have to confirm that on notice. I don't have that specific line item in front of me. This particular event raises a big red flag. I appreciate you have got commercial obligations. You are, working closely with advertisers. You are running limited advertising on SBS. This seems like an awful lot of money for a marketing event or a marketing evening. So if we could please have a full explanation as to each cost and whether you considered any other way of running the event other than to incur those costs. The next one I want to ask about is the Chief Marketing Officer dinner at Shea Beckett's in Chippendale, New South Wales, though this was a lot cheaper at $10,505. How many people attended that dinner? Senator, I believe that dinner was attended by around 25, 30 people. That included, as it states, chief marketing officers from big advertising brands to educate them about the belonging research that we've just talked about and better understanding the research and the discussion around how to better reflect the Australia we all see when we walk at our front door and how that might impact marketing plans and advertising communications.
And can you please provide a breakdown of that cost as well?
Yes, Senator.
So how much was spent on food, alcohol and the like? Mm-hmm. And if we could have on notice also an attendee list for both that function and the Tourdy SBS function?
Yes, Senator.
Thank you. I just want to move to the Eurovision events in 4 capital cities. Melbourne, I'll just ask broadcasting. Melbourne, Brisbane, Adelaide and Perth. So these 4 functions cost a total of $43,404. Why was there no event in Sydney?
Senator, I believe this year we provided the tour to SBS in Sydney and the Eurovision events around the country. It's in line with our local markets activity and working through how best to engage our agency and clients in service of driving revenue.
So this was not a community event. This was for clients, or who was invited?
Different cohorts of our agency partners, media agency partners, Senator.
Again, if I could ask on notice for a list of attendees and also a breakdown. Can you provide more detail on the breakdown of these costs?
Yes, Senator, we can look at that for you.
And are any of these charges, they're not recoverable at all?
No, Senator. Corporate hospitality and engaging both media agencies and clients to better understand the overall SBS product and the opportunity it affords to partner with us to reach all Australians in service of marketing goals is incredibly important. It's a very, very competitive sector and we need to play the right role there. All events generate commercial revenue. Eurovision, as pertaining to the Eurovision events you've mentioned alongside TDF are 2 of the biggest events from a revenue generating perspective. So these events help in those efforts.
Okay, I guess the creme de la creme is the upfront events. There were 5 of those: Sydney, Adelaide, Melbourne, Brisbane and Perth. The total cost for the 5 was $538,677. Now that is a lot of money. The Sydney event alone was $361,110. Can you please explain why such astronomical costs were incurred for these events?
Senator, the Upfronts event is an event indeed all television broadcaster and in fact broader publishers undertake to inform the market about the future year's plan. That event underpins our revenue negotiations for calendar year 2026 in this example and helps outline our slate, outline our audience proposition, our brand proposition to then conduct those negotiations. As a percentage of our overall revenue, it is relative to that sort of revenue performance and as previously mentioned, our revenue contributions to the overall funding of SBS is a third and allows us to invest in more content and services.
I would put to you that these are exorbitant costs. I mean, at the Sydney Upfront event, I mean, you're a broadcaster. You've got access to large studios. You've got access to extensive AV equipment, broadcasting equipment, video screens, and yet you spent AV and production at the Sydney Upfront was $207,000. Why can't you do your own AV and production? You're a national broadcaster.
Senator, I don't have the figures in front of me, but that event hosts around 500 to 600 people. We don't have that capacity at Artarmon. As I said, that event predates the commercial negotiations for the calendar year and is an incredibly important anchor in any commercial organisation's planning for revenue in the following year.
Well, I would dispute that because you can certainly run a showcase of what you're going to be doing for the next 12 months, including to your advertising partners without having to spend more than $500,000 doing so. I mean, I understand that, you know, people might want a great night out with lots of bells and whistles and great wine and great food, but you are utilising taxpayers' funding.
Senator, that's an afternoon event. As I said, it's designed to directly impact the revenue contribution for the following calendar year. It's important part of our schedule. If we are going to compete in the commercial landscape, it is increasingly competitive with streaming players advertising, with Google and Meta competing in the advertising space, and so it's an important investment in our commercial revenue return.
Look, I don't dispute the need for the event, not at all, but what I'm concerned about is the quantum of the costs that have been incurred. And so for each of those items, could you please give us a full narrative as to what the reason and the detail as to each particular cost so we can get a full understanding?
Thanks, Senator.
What were you displaying? What AV and production was going on in Sydney?
Senator, we produce a range of collateral reels for all of our upcoming show. Obviously, at this most recent upfronts, we're launching our World Cup format. The AV supports that activity.
Well, but $207,000, why can't you produce that content in-house?
We do produce most of that content, the actual reels in-house. The cost you're referring to is the costs pertaining to hosting to the event, but as you've requested, we're happy to come back to you with more information.
Sorry, I just didn't quite hear that. The costs relate to what, sorry?
Sorry, we do produce the reels themselves. A lot of those reels are in fact produced in-house. The costs you're referring to relate to the physical event, but as I'm happy to take that on notice and come back to you with more detail.
So all of the AV setup and the big screens and all the like?
And the event hosting, the venue hire, yes, that's correct.
Well, there's no event hosting charge here. So what was the event hosting charge?
The venue hosting, sorry, the venue hire.
Hosting.
Yes.
Well, that was very significant, $46,000. Okay, well, look, if you could please, because that I'm not even sure that a commercial broadcaster would incur that sort of cost.
Senator, I can't
running
speak
their
about the
upfronts.
commercial broadcasters, but I can say that these are, important events and extend beyond TV. Actually, more and more publishers are doing these events.
Yes, but Ms. Palfreyman, you've got an obligation to spend money in the best interests of taxpayers. You are a taxpayer-funded national broadcaster. If private organisations want to go and spend commercially as they see fit, then that's a matter for them. But you have a special obligation to Australians, including how you spend taxpayers' money. So I am concerned about that, and I do look forward to your further responses. Do you want to?
I do, Senator Henderson. Are we able to move on?
Do you want to share the call?
Well, if we're able to move on, I'm happy not to share the call, but if we're not able to move on from this agency, then yes, I will share it.
Could I also just understand why the Managing Director is not appearing?
Sorry, we just resolved that question.
Yeah.
Did you have... Are you going to...
No, just a couple more questions.
Okay.
Yeah. Could I also just understand why the Managing Director is not appearing this evening?
Senator, I am the Managing Director, Acting Managing Director at the moment. James Taylor, our previous Managing Director, left the business late last year.
I didn't realise that. Okay, thank you. So you're the Acting Managing Director. And what's happening in relation to the recruitment of a new Managing Director?
The board's undertaking an extensive recruitment process as we speak, and I expect we'll have an update in the coming weeks and months.
And are you an applicant, Ms Palfreyman?
Senator, thank you for your interest in the process. We all look forward to the outcome of the decision.
I take that you are applying to keep the job.
Yeah, you can infer that from my comment. Thanks, Senator.
All right. Well, we look forward to hearing the outcome of the board's decision. As the potential new Managing Director, could I please urge you to look very closely at this sort of expenditure?
Yes, Senator, we will.
And we look forward to getting further detail in relation to these costs. And I would be very hopeful that in the next 12 months that we will see closer attention to ensuring that these costs are not as high for these functions.
We'll come back to you with that information, Senator, on notice.
Thank you very much. Thank you all very much for appearing this evening. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Senator Henderson. I now excuse the officers of the Special Broadcasting Service with the committee's thanks. Thank you for your appearance, your evidence and the work that goes into preparing for these hearings.
Thank you, Chair.
All the best.
Thank you, Senators.
We will now call officers of the E-Safety Commissioner, but I will just suspend for a moment while they come to the table. Thank you, Broadcasting. If we could recommence. I now welcome officers from the Office of the E-Safety Commissioner. Welcome, Ms Inman Grant. Welcome back. Do you wish to make an opening statement?
I do, please, if that's all right.
Please,
All right.
please go ahead.
Well, it's fitting to be here to speak with you today on Safer Internet Day. And in the world of online safety, a lot can change in just one day, even more in the 2 months that we were last here. Just last week, we released a transparency report demonstrating that 8 of the world's technology giants are continually failing to prevent all of their platforms and services from being weaponized by predators for online child sexual exploitation and sexual extortion. These are the most egregious forms of online harm imaginable. If there isn't the will to prevent the sexual abuse of children, then what hope do we have for addressing other persistent or more hidden harms? Also last week, our regulatory counterparts at the European Commission issued a preliminary finding that TikTok had failed to mitigate risks posed by its addictive design. Recently, we saw YouTube announce to its creator community that it would roll back policies to allow for the monetization of harmful content, including self-harm and suicidal ideation. And Grok continued to attract worldwide attention to the concerning content it's allegedly generating, and eSafety has 2 pending related investigations into XAI and illegal content on the X platform. But some of this black slide has been met with forceful pushback. Our Australian partners and law enforcement uncovered a sadistic child sexual abuse ring. France, Spain, Malaysia, and Ireland have followed our lead and are pursuing social media minimum age restrictions. And we wrote to Roblox last week indicating that we will actively test whether or not the 9 safety commitments they made to us last year have been effectively implemented, particularly those changes designed to prevent adults and children intermingling on their platform. We're also pleased to announce today, and this is the first announcement, that as a result of our engagement with Apple, the company has taken further action against chat roulette-style apps, which can actively pair child predators with children. Since last year, Apple has removed or issued warnings to over 100 of these apps and terminated the accounts of dozens of app developers. The company has also updated its policy in response. So what this has demonstrated is how the app stores can work as effective gatekeepers against harms. And we will be reminding app store providers of their obligations under the app code to do the same with nudifying apps that allow the creation of exploitative deepfakes of children and adults, just as we have already done with one of the most prolific nudifying sites that was being utilized with devastating impact in Australian schools. I do want to turn to the implementation of the social media delay. It has been more than 2 decades since the major social media platforms were built for adults but inhabited by children. These were never designed to optimize for safety, but instead for revenues and reach. The social media delay is more than a world-forced digital reform. It also signals a major cultural reset. No such reset, whether speed limits, sun or water safety, or smoking, have reached full fruition and impact in 2 short months. There is no precedent for reform of this scale to take hold that fast. Now, our goal is to normalize the age of access to the dangerous algorithms and features of social media to the age of 16. This also means social media companies do not have access to our children, while we take this vital time to further build their digital literacy and hone their critical reasoning skills. You can be assured that we are rigorous in ensuring that the platforms are complying with the law. As an AI-generated Mark Twain may have extrapolated today, reports of the death of the social media ban have been greatly exaggerated. Indeed, we are still in both the earliest and most complex phase of the regulatory process, and that means ensuring that companies are effectively deploying their technologies, policies, and processes to prevent circumvention of their age assurance systems. Remember that while some of the companies have very accurate age inference tools, some previously had no age gating at all beyond self-declaration, so are effectively starting from scratch. It's also important to remember that this is complex technical regulation, not instant gratification. But I will reiterate, the first stage of this process, the restriction of 4.7 million social media accounts, cannot be considered anything but a stunning success. And this was a point of time within the first 2 days. But to put this number in perspective, there are 2.5 million 8 to 15-year-olds in this country. So by any standard, it's a good start. Now, what eSafety is doing in this next early stage, which is not an end state, is conducting intensive investigations, testing claims, building an evidence base, and determining whether reasonable steps are genuinely being taken. This is not dalliance, it is due diligence, and it's how enforcement will succeed, not just in the media cycle or before Parliament, but in courtrooms and in boardrooms and across the entire digital ecosystem. Real, meaningful change must be done properly. This is the only way that it can remain durable. Thank you.
Thank you, eSafety Commissioner. Before I turn to questions, I will just indicate that we are now able to release the officials of the National Museum of Australia. So thank you for your attendance and preparation, and you go with the committee's gratitude. Now I'll go to Senator Smith.
Good evening, and thank you very much for your participation. Before I start, can we just be clear about terminology?
Sure.
I've heard the word deactivation, I've seen the word cancelled or paused. So when we're talking about the social media ban and the 4.7 million you use the word restricted accounts. What is the correct terminology, and what does the terminology represent exactly?
Well, because the companies are set up in different ways, I'll give you an example. The vast majority of what we're talking about are deactivations, so the removals of detected or known under 16-year-old accounts. There are some platforms, such as YouTube, which have Google accounts. So a person, including a young person, will sign into a Google account, and what they've technically done is that they've restricted access for under 16s to YouTube. So you can't call that a deactivation, it's a restriction. So, but again, the intent of the legislation is to prevent under 16s from having and holding an account. So technically, there are different ways that companies may go about that, but it's effectively achieving the same thing.
But not a silly question to start with.
No, not a silly question at all.
So when we think about the 4.7 million, are they 100% deactivated? Are they 50 to 60% restricted? So when we're thinking about proportionality, what is the right way of thinking about deactivation, restriction, and other terms?
Well, this should be either complete removal, restriction, or deactivation of the accounts. As I mentioned in my opening statement, that was the first thing we asked them to focus on, and this was representing a point of time, the first 2 days. They're in a much more difficult position here, and we've all heard anecdotes, but what we need is proof that will stand up as evidence in court of law. What they need to be doing now is to actively be ensuring that their technology systems and processes, and some of them are using third-party technologies, that they're implementing the settings effectively. They're following best practice as recommended by the age assurance vendors, so that they're effectively preventing young people from what we call recidivism, so recreating separate accounts, trying to spoof their age assurance systems, or find other circumvention measures, such as through VPNs. This is the phase that we're at now. We've issued a second set of legal notices asking a range of questions. Another thing that we're looking at is whether or not their waterfall approaches and those triggers seem to be working accurately. So we're turning over every rock. The powers that Parliament largely gave us in this area to be able to peruse this was through legally binding information notices, but we will have to look at other ways to sort of test whether they're doing this correctly, and that includes speaking to the technology vendors of the third parties that they're using.
Thank you very much. So the 4.7 million, in earlier evidence today, a departmental official was able to share with us that the 4.7 million was a composite of the deactivated/restricted accounts from 10 platforms. Can you identify each of those 10 platforms and the number of restricted accounts that get us to the 4.7 million?
Well, we simply added it up. As I mentioned, these were legally binding notices that went to 10 companies, and they now represent active regulatory investigations. So a year ago, we produced a transparency report with many of the same companies, asking them whether they knew how many under 16s they had. A number of them said, "Oh, we don't have any users under the age of 13." But our separate youth and parent research demonstrated that actually up to 84% of 8 to 12-year-olds in 2024 had access to at least one social media account. At that time, we sort of gathered a baseline, knowing that, as I said, 2.5 million Australians are between the ages of 8 and 5, and understanding the proportion on which most young people are on YouTube versus Reddit versus others. We were able, using methodology, I can't say methodologically rigorous, research methods to quantify how many we expected. When we worked with these companies to put out public compliance plans, which we tried to do so that they would be transparent before and indicate the number that they expected were on their platforms and then how many they actually deactivated. None of the companies took that up. We have had 2 companies voluntarily share those numbers, but we're not at liberty to break down those numbers if we want to maintain the integrity of these investigations. Many of the companies already have said that they want this information collected, and I don't want to give them any room to undermine these investigations.
So my understanding is that Meta has confirmed 550,000 accounts were deactivated.
Yes.
And Snapchat has confirmed 415,000 accounts were deactivated. Yes. So that is 965,000 accounts deactivated.
Yep.
But the Prime Minister and the Minister are out there saying 4.7 million.
Oh, that's because each of the other platforms have a large number of deactivations or restrictions on their accounts, but they have not chosen to make that information public. I cannot compel them to do so without potentially undermining the integrity of the current investigation that's going on.
I don't want to be unkind, but your job is to demonstrate to us that the 4.7 million figure is accurate, first point. So your job is to demonstrate to us, and there's a number of different ways we can do this. Secondly, the Prime Minister and the Minister and members of the government have been out parading $4.7 million, but what you're saying is please take us on trust that the difference between 965,000, which is verified by Meta and Snapchat, and the difference between 4.7 million is something that should be taken on trust.
Well, I will turn this over to Miss Snell, who has spent 20 years in regulatory investigations, and will only say, before I hand over to her, that these numbers were provided to us by the companies and they are legally binding. So they need to tell the truth. And we are seeking to make sure that the numbers they gave us are accurate.
And what we are seeking to do is to make sure that the numbers that you have provided,
sure,
that are now in the public domain, that are being used by the head of government and the minister, are in fact accurate, a scrutiny process.
Sure.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Senator. Heidi Snell, General Manager, Regulatory Operations. I want to first just talk to the committee a little bit about how we got those numbers to give you some confidence in the overall figure. So firstly, we, as the Commissioner has referred to, we issued information notices in relation to 10 platforms. I can confirm who those platforms were, which is Snap, Reddit, YouTube, X, Twitch, Kik, Threads, Instagram, Facebook and TikTok. And we required them to give us figures as of particular dates. So the first one was we required them to give us figures by the 18th of December relating to specifically the immediate few days on and around 10 December. So the figures were very much a point in time at that point in time. Those were required under compulsory information notices. That means that there's an obligation for them to respond, and there are penalties if they fail to respond or if they provide false information. So on that basis, we believe there's a reasonable ability to have confidence in the numbers that we received. What's also important to understand is that those notices were issued as part of regulatory investigations that are ongoing, and it is important that we maintain the protection of those investigations in the sense that we don't want to compromise those, because as we continue to investigate, should we become aware that the information that they provided was false or misleading, or should we have other concerns around whether they have taken reasonable steps and we wish to take that to court or use other enforcement powers, we do not want to give them any ability to question or undermine our investigative processes. That said, what I can say is that we can take on notice the extent to which we can share specific information that we might have received under those investigation notices. I don't have the numbers of each individual platform before me here today to give to you right now.
Really?
Really, I don't.
Okay.
I can tell you the 4.7.
Yeah, I'm just thinking that,
and-
if I could interrupt, sorry.
Certainly.
4.7 million, a number that has been bandied around in the public domain, and you wouldn't have thought to bring in your estimates file a detailed breakdown of those 10 platforms in terms of how you would get to 4.7 million?
I think because, Senator, if I may say, that it is possible that it's appropriate for us to claim a PII claim in respect of that, and that's something we would like to explore further. So I'm not saying no, we can't give it to you, but I am saying that there is a process that we think we need to go through.
This is fascinating.
And on that fascinating
No,
note,
sorry,
Senator Smith,
no.
can I just indicate that I'm going to share the call in a minute?
Okay. So the 4.7 million deactivated accounts is the composite figure that was provided to your organisation to meet the 18th of December requirement?
That's correct.
Correct. So a different way to present information, right, would have been to have said, we can confirm for the public 965,000 deactivated accounts plus.
I will say that at the point in time that we were sharing that information, none of the platforms had indicated that they were prepared to disclose information publicly. And in fact,
So how do you get to the public disclosure of 4.7 million?
Because
right?
that's an aggregate, so it doesn't
I know it's an
disclose
aggregate.
any
I'm trying to
individual.
break down the aggregate when in fact you only have the power to disclose publicly two sets of figures, the Meta figure and the Snapchat figure, because they have given you permission to release those.
I want to take a step back for a moment, Senator, and say that at that point in time, they had not given us permission to disclose, no platform had given permission to disclose individual numbers. So by disclosing an aggregate, we were not revealing anything that any particular platform would raise an issue with.
Have you independently verified?
Our investigations are ongoing, and that is part of the process.
So the 4.7 million asterisk has not been fully verified. Elements of the 4.7, right, are still being verified.
I would say that at this stage, notwithstanding that, for example, Meta and Snap have said their figures publicly, that does not mean they're independently verified either. So there is a process, and investigations are on foot. Investigations
So what does the
naturally take some
4.7 million
point.
actually represent? Because it's an unverified figure.
It represents the number of accounts that platforms had informed us that they had deactivated.
So,
Okay, sorry, Senator Smith, I'm going to have to share the call, but I'm happy to come back to you on this topic. Senator Whitten.
Good evening. Since we last spoke, you have received another letter from Mr Jim Jordan of the Committee, the Judiciary, requesting your testimony in their inquiries into foreign laws censoring free speech in the United States. The letter was dated 30th of December 25. Happy New Year.
Yeah.
Have you provided a response to the request, and will you be going to testify?
I have provided a response by way of a letter and a statement answering a number of the committee's questions to help them finalize the report. The letter and statement was actually delivered to the committee by the Washington, D.C. Post, the DFAT Post. I think the determination was made when the second letter really expanded the scope of the congressman's concerns around the laws deliberated and passed by Parliament and the policies put forward by the government, including the social media minimum age, that I explained my role as interpreting and implementing this legislation, but I'm not the creator. Obviously not. I can't carry the water for the Parliament or the government, so they decided it really needed to be expanded to be a government-wide engagement.
Will your response be being made public again?
The congressman certainly made his public. No one has asked for that statement and letter. If you wish, I can put it on notice and table that for you.
In your response to the judiciary for the first one that we received, you said, quote, "In other words, nothing we do here in Australia prevents American companies from displaying non-child sexual abuse material to Americans." This response was countered in the response from Congress with the following claims as quoted from their response. "New documents indicate that eSafety harassed American companies ahead of the implementation of the social media minimum age law. 5 emails and correspondence produced to the committee show that even before the law's effective date, eSafety directed American platforms to release public-facing compliance commitments based on eSafety's template 6 and demanded meetings with platforms that did not immediately comply. And in addition, documents show that eSafety formally asked American companies how they plan to mitigate potential circumvention of the SMMA law via VPNs. In 2024, you used concerns about VPNs, which may conceal a user's country of origin, as a pretext to demand global takedowns of social media content. The documents obtained by the committee suggest that you may be using this playbook again. Your actions have clearly alarmed and upset Congress, and I asked you this last time, but are you concerned about harming Australian-US relations?
You read a lot there, and I'd like to take some of those issues in turn, if I may, Senator. I'd like to say I'm not alone. The same committee just published a report saying that the European Commission had censored American voices for the past 10 years and also accused the Irish commissioner of harassing companies. If you looked at the documents that were attached to the chairman's letter to me, they were a redacted letter from one of the companies around that voluntary public compliance voluntary process we asked them to undertake, and that was simply in the interest of public transparency. And I'm not sure if it was where I told them to have a lovely weekend or where I respectfully requested that they provide this information that constituted harassment. But, you know, again, there isn't anything to substantiate that claim. What was the second issue? There were a couple that were raised. I guess what I would say is my job, I was appointed by the Minister of Communications, is to implement the provisions of the Online Safety Act. That means you have to regulate the companies that are in scope, some of whom are domiciled in the United States, some of whom are not. So 4 of the companies that are captured by the social media minimum age includes Kik, which is an Australian company, Lemonade and TikTok, which are Chinese, and Yubo, which is a French company. But I think the point that they were making, which I don't think is right, is nothing that we do here. I mean, obviously we have to talk to our regulatory targets to make sure that they're complying with our processes, and we do that in quite a constructive and cordial way. And then there was the final issue, which was the VPNs. I think there was some confusion by the chairman. So the issue he raised in the context of Wakely and removal of Class 1 content or violent content, where we came down was that it was acceptable to geo-block, but we pointed out that geo-blocking wasn't always effective because 28% of Australians were using VPNs. And our biggest concern really is innocent eyes in young people or people who didn't want to see the content coming across it because it was gratuitously violent. What we're asking here for the social media minimum age is a different question around circumvention. And all we were saying is that the companies themselves need to put secure enough processes, policies, and technologies in place, they're responsible for any circumvention, and not just through the usage of VPNs. In fact, we put in our regulatory guidance all the signals that they could look at, IP addresses, making sure that the apps were downloaded from the Australian App Store to be able to tell whether or not they were based in Australia or elsewhere. But it's really about preventing the spoofing and the weaponization of their age assurance systems. So two totally different issues.
Sorry, can I just ask for a copy of those letters on notice to Commissioner?
Sure, I'll make them available to the
If you've
committee.
got them and able to hand them up this evening, that would be great.
If I can access them this evening, we will try to.
Sorry, Senator.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Sorry, Senator, did you mean letters attached to the letter that Senator Whitten read
That's
out?
right. Yes, the letters, the ones to and from Congress.
So they are attached to the Congressman Jordan's letter, but we can provide those separately.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That was great. But my question was, and I understand you've got the mandate and the job of doing what you're doing.
Right.
But are you concerned it's impacting Australia-US relations?
Well, DFAT has been very engaged. My department secretary has been engaged as the secretary of the Attorney General's. This is a very unprecedented request for another legislative body to try and compel a senior bureaucrat from another government doing the job that the government set out for her to do. So there are going to be a range of conditions. I'll be seeking out my own legal counsel to understand what my options and my limitations are. But this is something I'm going to have to work through government-wide.
Yeah. I think in a previous questioning, you'd said that you are an Australian citizen, but I think Mr. Jordan is inferring that you might be a dual citizen. Is that correct?
I am a dual citizen,
Okay.
yes. And many dual citizens have served in senior levels in the federal government.
Yeah. Does that concern you in any way? I mean, I don't know what powers the US might have over somebody with American citizenship to compel them to come, or...
I think they're more focused on illegal immigrants at the moment right now, but yes, I'm sure that would be cause for concern. Okay. But I guess what I would say is I think it would be highly unusual for me executing my job that was, the Online Safety Act was developed by the coalition. It's always been a bipartisan issue delivered by Parliament. I am executing the will and the laws of Australia as passed by the Parliament.
Okay. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Senator Whitten. Senator Walker.
Thanks, Chair. I've just got a couple of quick questions. It's really good to hear those stats coming in, given that it only came enforced in December. So really positive to hear the effects so far. In terms of the engagement with the social media platforms, what's that engagement look like? Do you want to ensure that they're complying with the new legislation? What's that engagement looks like on an ongoing basis?
So we've stood up what we call an industry supervision team. So they do the day-to-day sort of engagement with all the platforms around the range of responsibilities. So in addition to the social media minimum age, a number of these platforms will also be subject to our illegal harms codes and standards, and the new ones that are coming into force in March. Our SMAR team, the social media age restriction team that developed all the regulatory guidance, is really now serving as the enforcement arm, and so they're working hand in glove with our legal team and our enforcement task force to ensure that we're sending out and delivering these layered notices so that we can continue investigating and testing that the evidence that has been given to us holds up, and that these companies are complying with our laws and implementing these technologies in an effective way, and again preventing under 16s from continuing to create or have or hold accounts on these social media sites.
Yep. I note in your opening statement you touched on reasonable steps. Would you mind outlining what reasonable steps actually means in practice?
I will turn that over to Ms. Snell, who is expert in reasonable steps.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Senator. So our regulatory guidance sets out our expectations in terms of reasonable steps. So the legislation simply provides that they are required to take reasonable steps and that we will provide guidance on that. We've focused on a principles-based approach to our regulatory guidance. So the reasonable steps should respect and protect fundamental human rights and be reliable, accurate, robust and effective. They must be privacy preserving and data minimising, accessible, inclusive and fair, transparent, proportionate and evidence-based and responsive to emerging technology and risks. We've also given some expectations around what we expect platforms to do. So that includes, firstly, which we've seen as part of their initial steps, identifying accounts that are currently held by under 16s and deactivating or removing those, preventing new accounts, as the Commissioner talked about as being kind of part of the process we're in at the moment, preventing workarounds, so VPNs, etc., processes to review decisions about deactivation and to correct any errors in that area, and to provide clear and accessible ways for people to report underage accounts. We have stressed to platforms that they should take a layered approach, as the Commissioner referred to. So that means not just relying on one approach to ensure that they don't have underage accounts, but more using a variety of different techniques to both identify and remove or refuse new accounts.
On age verification, are you aware of any platforms that force users to upload their ID to access social media?
That's specifically prevented through an amendment to the legislation. And so what we've written into the regulatory guidance is that while digital ID or ID can be requested, it can't be the only form of age verification, nor can it be the form of last resort. So if somebody is fundamentally opposed to providing their ID in some other way, shape, or form, and it's interesting because there are real generational differences. People of my vintage are much more comfortable sharing their ID, but for young people, as you would know, taking selfies and facial age estimation doesn't seem to fuss them that much, and so they're more comfortable doing that. Where a number of us are like, I don't want to biometric, a scan of my face taken, even if it's not saved. But so we wanted them to give choices, and some of the platforms have used other novel forms, such as a Australian-based solution called Connect ID that verifies whether or not what a person's age is based on the information they've provided to their bank. Obviously, banks do know your customer very well and are very rigorous in their processes.
And off the back of that, what privacy protections are there for users that are built into the law?
That's one of the really unique facets of this legislation. First of all, you'll recall that when the Department of Communications ran the age assurance technical trial, they didn't just test the 53 or so technologies for accuracy and efficacy. They also tested to ensure that they were privacy preserving and also secure. The other unique feature is that there is a dual regulator model with the social media minimum age. So the Privacy Commissioner has a role if any of these technologies are found to be using any of these technologies in a way that violates the Privacy Act. She put out her own regulatory guidance, just saw her this morning, and she indicated they haven't had many, if any, complaints or concerns at all. So far, so good. We still have a long way to go.
And just on a slightly different topic, how many people contact the eSafety Commissioner per year?
Per year. Well, so we have a couple of different doorways, if you will. So in terms of our complaints and investigations, that's through our report abuse queue. I don't know if we've got the overall number, but it's in the tens of thousands that come into investigations, and I can certainly give you numbers because they continue to increase. We've seen adult cyber abuse reports increase about 65%. Illegal and restricted content has risen about 71%. Image-based abuse, 34%, and the largest proportion of that that's grown is sexual extortion, largely of young men. And then we've seen a 15% increase in cyberbullying. That doesn't necessarily mean that the prevalence of that is increasing. It could be that there is more awareness of us. We've also set up a forum for the public around what their experiences are with the social media minimum age, and we have a much broader inquiries section where members of the public can reach us, and that can cover all manner of forms. I don't know if we've done, we've counted the numbers on that, Catherine, on the inquiries.
What we do know from the last estimates, I believe we provided the number of inquiries we received, and apologies, Catherine King, General Manager for the Hansard. In 2025, we received 5,813 inquiries through our line, so we receive around 5,000.
If it's helpful, we could probably aggregate the numbers of reports through inquiries, the SMAR form, and through complaints of investigations, if that's of use.
Okay. Thank you. That's all for me. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Senator Walker. Senator Payman.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening. First, Commissioner, can I congratulate you on being awarded the Public Service Medal? I don't think any public servant experiences the vitriol that you do. So, for enforcing policies of the government as you are. So thank you. Just wanted to put that on the record. Commissioner, at the Sydney Dialogue 2025, you described the social media ban's effect on children as being similar to throwing them into the waves without swimming lessons, which I agree. You also said at that talk, prior to the legislation of the ban, you had been raising concerns. Are you able to share what those concerns were?
I think what you're referring to was a discussion I had with a senior official from Indonesia's Ministry for Communications and facilitated by David Spears. He asked me about some of my earlier testimony and concerns about the approach of the social media ban before it was deliberated and we knew what it would look like. And I did use a water analogy about teaching kids to swim and making sure that just as we fence pools and back it with enforcement, that it was going to be a much harder thing to do when you're effectively fencing the ocean, but that we wouldn't throw our kids in the water without teaching them how to swim, which is why we take a holistic approach. And so he had sort of said, well, have you come around to this? And really based on the scaffolding that Parliament provided us with, and then through the consultation that we were able to undertake, including with young people, to really help us hone and listen to the public about what the regulatory guidance should look like, and that included the industry too, and even the ability for us to have the autonomy to create a children's statement on digital rights that we are very committed to, as well as develop our own evaluation of the implementation that not only looks at the potential positive effects, but also any unintended consequences. And we're really committed to making sure that that is methodologically rigorous, transparent and open. Later this month, we'll be putting the methodology and the framework on the Open Science Framework, and then we expect to start getting some results. We have 4,100 children paired with there are 4,100 parents, so a pretty large sample size where we're going to be tracking this over the period of 2 years, which I think will give us a really solid evidence base about what is working and what's not.
Thank you. Let's say I'm a 14-year-old. The ban does not stop me from being served distressing or harmful content in a logged out state or on services that aren't included in the ban. It wouldn't stop me from being preyed upon by manipulative and addictive algorithms, nor will it prevent me from being bullied or being groomed, given the messaging and gaming services exemption. Obviously, the Phase 2 codes that eSafety has developed and the planned digital duty of care legislation go further to addressing the concerns I've just raised. But on its own, I'm just curious to understand what is the point of the social media ban when there isn't any digital duty of care?
Well, I mean, I think in many ways the social media delay is a form of a circuit breaker where we're trying to prevent children from accessing the predatory and deceptive features like snap streaks and endless scroll and algorithms that send them down rabbit holes, and so that we can take this really valuable time and make sure that we're building their digital and algorithmic literacy and building their critical reasoning and resilience. Cyberbullying, image-based abuse, all of the online abuse we're aware of are largely human issues, and any platform, whether it's a messaging platform, a gaming platform, or social media platform that brings them together can facilitate some form of harm. The harms are different, and we're monitoring for that. And I guess what I would say is this is why we have our complaints schemes. So we can use this to remediate harms around child cyberbullying and image-based abuse or adult cyber abuse. And now what some of our codes and standards will help us do will particularly apply to gaming platforms, a much broader subset of sites, including messaging sites, but also AI companions and chatbots. And that will prevent under 18s from being served content that is pornographic, sexually explicit, extremely violent, suicidal ideation, self-harm, and disordered eating. So these have to work as a whole. The social media delay will achieve some things, but we're bolstering that with our other functions.
And so do you have an indication of when the digital duty of care would be legislated?
Well, that will be a question. I mean, the government, through the communications minister, has indicated her intention, and every time I talk to her about it, she's very excited.
So it has been 15 months since that commitment was made, and obviously the question that everyone keeps asking is, are we, by legislating the ban, are we putting the cart before the horse when it comes to, defending the social media ban delayed development, whether that delay has impacted the digital duty of care, because being 15 months, shouldn't that be, sped up?
We did deal with, it's sort of difficult, and because e-safety was meant to appear a bit earlier today, but we dealt with the policy part with the department here around the work that they're doing on digital duty of care. So there's not a lot that we can traverse about what the government is doing. Rather than repeat what the department said, I'll suggest that you go back and have a look at that evidence. We have, and I'm just trying to go back to my notes because I know we spoke about it many, many hours ago, but we have, there was a review into the Online Safety Act. We actually brought that forward, and based on those recommendations, we're undertaking a body of work. We've committed not just only to a duty of care, but also restricting access to notify non-consensual tracking services. There's a range of recommendations that have been made, including changes to eSafety's powers and governance. So we're considering all of that. The work's ongoing, but it's something that we really do want to consider carefully, get right, but bring forward as soon as possible.
Yeah,
sorry, that was my summary.
No, that's totally fine.
That was my summary of a few hours ago.
Consultation that's already been done. It's been 15 months. So when are we
the consultation wasn't done 15 months ago.
No, sorry. The commitment by the government was done 15 months ago, and you've just told me there's been extensive consultation. So when will the Digital Duty of Care Bill be legislated?
We addressed this with the department this morning. I'm sorry that you weren't here for that
I understand
evidence.
there's a million other committees that we were on, but I'd presume that the e-safety commissioner would be aware of the developments around that, given it's so closely tied to
sure,
the
and
social
I'm
media
sure
ban.
she's got a lot to add. I just wanted to be clear that the legislative work is happening in the department. But
yeah, no, I think that work is starting in earnest. We're having conversations. We started the Safety by Design initiative in 2018, and so a lot of the duty of care is predicated on those Safety by Design principles. The other thing is there are digital duties of care in other parts of the world. We're part of a global online safety regulators network, so we're looking closely and we're speaking to other regulators about how it works in practice, and so. We will have suggestions about what we'd like to see, what we think would be most implementable, most successful, and really help us put the onus back on the platforms themselves to incorporate the safety at the front end rather than, leaving us in a situation where we have to play a game of whack-a-mole. So I think we're all really aligned that this is where we want and need to go.
Now, it's been reported that adult men's faces can verify teen girls' Snapchat accounts. Am I correct in understanding that you were of the view that all 10 age-restricted platforms were in compliance with the legislation on January 16th of this year, 2026?
Could take that.
Thanks, Senator. I think that what we were saying around that time was that we were pleased with the information they had provided around the number of deactivations. However, we have ongoing investigations in relation to a number of services that we're using compulsory information notices, and to really test what they've told us. And obviously, there's been a lot of anecdotal stories in the media around, for example, the example you just gave, and other ways that young people might be circumventing the restriction. And so we are currently using a range of tools and techniques to test what we're hearing from platforms, engaging with, for example, the providers of verification services as well to understand their settings. That is ongoing investigations. So at this stage, I don't think we can conclude one way or another whether individual platforms are sufficiently taking reasonable steps.
Yeah, just because it's, quite bizarre that obvious loopholes like this exist, and how the government can consider that as being, sort of compliant or being effective, rather.
I think it's about the initial stages and understanding, as the Commissioner said, that these things do take some time. And so very positive that the platforms all chose to engage and did take steps to deactivate in the initial stages. Then naturally, as with any new system that you have, you realise as you roll it out that perhaps not everything is working as smoothly. The question is, are they taking appropriate steps to deal with those issues when they come up? Yeah. We're working through that with them and continuing to investigate.
Just got some rapid fire questions just in terms of numbers, because I'm mindful of the time. For each age-restricted social media platform, how many under 16 accounts have been deactivated to date?
We don't have with us the specific numbers for each platform. Mm-hmm. We are continuing to seek further information from them. What I can say is the numbers that were provided by the platforms, and an aggregate was over 4.7 million that we announced early in January.
How many? So you wouldn't be able to tell how many of them were inactive or duplicate or alternative accounts?
Not at this
No,
point in time.
not at this point. Okay. I can probably pick that up later. Just finally, in regards to Twitter or X's plan to use its Grok AI to perform age estimation, I think the Commissioner was quoted in the Sydney Morning Herald as saying that it would be interesting to see how efficacious that is and how spicy. Has eSafety formed a view as to the efficacy of Grok in this regard?
Well, we actually have two separate investigations, one into X, as I mentioned, but I don't think you were here for my opening statement, but one into XAI, which is the purveyor of Grok, around the alleged generation of child sexual abuse material, which is in violation of our DIS standard. So again, yes, that was kind of a marketing I suppose, blitz around how Grok was going to be politically incorrect and spicy. That was how it was described. But I was very concerned to see that in the Washington Post, they actually obtained some documentation that were given to people at XAI who were working on Grok, indicating that they were likely going to come across quite violent and sexual material, and for them to sign a waivers to relieve them of any liability, I imagine, around mental health and well-being. So, again, we'll see if we can get our hands on those documents and what they actually tell us, but it certainly looks like there was intention there.
And finally, just what platforms is eSafety considering adding to the social media ban currently? Are there any additional platforms?
There are a few other platforms that have self-assessed in. Blue Sky is one of them, and Lemonade, which is also owned by ByteDance, so it's considered a TikTok clone. There are also Match.com, which has a number of dating sites. They assess themselves as in. They're under 18, as is Yubo, which is a French, used to be dating, but social media site, previously for under teens, but now for 18 and over, and they've age verified their entire user base twice. So, so the list has expanded. Again, it's not a static list. It's not something that we're continuing to try to expand. I think we've covered some of the main ones. We're also looking closely at different migratory patterns. But what we've really seen in the past 2 months is that while we might see some initial spikes in downloads, and some of the platforms were Yubo, Lemonade, Big O Live, CapCut, CoverStar, and a few others, you see a spike, you see some downloads, you don't actually see a lot of usage, and then you see the trend fall off. And that's probably because the major social media platforms have done such a good job over the years of really entrenching their users and having a critical mass. So when kids are fanning out to go to different platforms and they don't have a critical mass of their friends there, it's, they're tending to leave or abandon those.
Senator, just to clarify, so as you know, we don't have a power to declare whether services are in or out. So the lists we've provided publicly are to assist parents and children to navigate the social media minimum age restriction. So I just wanted to, it's often confused that we are the ones with the list and we add and take platforms off. That's the purpose of why we've prepared the list. It's not a declaratory list. People that aren't on that list still have the obligation to comply if they meet the test in the Act.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, Senator Payman.
Bless you.
Sorry.
Bless you. I'm just waiting for the next one.
Okay, so we've gone a little bit over our scheduled break. We will take our scheduled break now, and we will come back at 9:05.
How much longer do you think I'm scheduled to actually speak at an event at 10 o'clock.
believe it or not.
I'm hopeful that we will have about 5 to 10 minutes of questions from Malcolm and then about 10 to 15 minutes of questions for the coalition, but I'm looking at...
I was going to go back to my hotel room. It's an overseas presentation, but we were supposed to be on at 3, so I didn't think it would go this late.
We won't have... We're off audio.
yes, can we turn off the broadcasting for a moment, please? We'll have this conversation off the transcript.
All right.
Thank you, Broadcasting. We are resuming with the E-Safety Commissioner, and I am going first to Senator Smith.
Thank you very much. Commissioner, my apologies. We send our congratulations as well on your recognition having received the Public Service Medal Award in the most recent Honours Day announcement, so congratulations to you.
Congratulations.
I have been keeping a tally in terms of publicly available information about the numbers of deactivated, removed and restricted accounts. And so I have Snap at 415,000. I don't have anything for Reddit. I don't have anything for YouTube. I don't have anything for Twitch. I don't have anything for Kik. Threads 39,000, Instagram 330,000, Facebook 173,000 and TikTok 200,000, and I'm missing the other platform.
I don't think
Sorry?
YouTube.
YouTube, I think. Did you say?
No, I said YouTube. That's 9. I thought there was 10.
X? Did you say X?
X Corp.
Of course, yeah. Okay, great. Thank you very much for that. Are you able to verify that those are the same figures that you have?
I can say that I think that some of those figures are slightly different because they're point in time. So I understand that the figures, particularly that Meta and Snap released, were figures at the point in time that they released them, whereas the figures that we had used in our 4.7 aggregate number were based on the responses that we received to the notices on 18 December.
Thank you. Have you provided advice to anyone in government, the department, the minister or the Prime Minister's office in regards to the deaggregated 4.7 million deactivated, removed and restricted accounts?
No, we have not.
But you have been requested that disaggregated number by the Department of Communications because that was their evidence to this committee earlier today. So you have had it requested, but you've not provided it.
I don't believe that we've had I'm not aware of a specific request. We've had discussions with them and again about the issue of the fact that we've received that information under compulsory information notices and that we consider that information to therefore be subject potentially to a PII. And so we're not disclosing that beyond e-safety in terms of our investigation processes.
Because they understand that if they were to ask for it formally, you would say that you're not legally
we consider it's not appropriate to disclose that information at this point in time, whilst the investigations are on foot. There may come a point in time, and it may be that if we take this question, the question of the individual numbers on notice, that we will have further consideration as to whether that's likely to prejudice the investigations or not.
Have you verified the data that was provided to you by each of the 10 platforms when they met their 18th of December reporting obligation?
That's an ongoing investigation process. What I can say, Senator Smith, is that we are using the powers that we have been given under the Act. Those powers are information notices that, as I said, they are required to comply with, and there are penalties for if they provide false and misleading information. We are continuing to investigate and consider other ways in which we can verify that information.
Thank you. The ongoing investigation, has it been completed for any or all of the 10 platforms?
No, it has not.
So, I would say a correct statement from the Prime Minister was not that preliminary analysis. I'm going to read the Prime Minister's statement just to make it crystal clear. Crystal clear. Before I read the Prime Minister's statement, did you review or have access to any draft media statements prepared by the Prime Minister's office, the Minister's office or the Department of Communication that led to the final media release issued on the 16th of January?
The
E-Safety Commissioner can't speak for the Prime Minister or
No,
for the PMO.
no, you're being... you're misrepresenting what I'm saying. I'm asking, did the E-Safety Commission
I'm just saying,
review or have input into any of the draft media statements, the Prime Minister's draft media statement, the Minister's draft media statement, that led to the final media statement that was issued on the 16th of January 2026?
What I can say is that it's regular for our communications teams when there's a joint media release or have to have discussions, but we can take that on notice just to double check and make sure around any particular input that was in there. We do deal with the Minister's office around releases when there was a press conference related to that data, but we'll take that on notice. We did not directly liaise with the Prime Minister's office.
The Prime Minister has said that with more than 4.7 million under 16 accounts already deactivated, removed or restricted within days of the law coming into effect on the 10th of December. What that should have said is with more than 4.7 million under 16 accounts unverified to be deactivated, removed or restricted. That was your evidence. You said there were ongoing investigations. None of the investigations had been completed against any of the 10 platforms. That 4.7 million figure, while it might be your figure, comprised of the contributions of each of those 10 platforms, it is unverified. It is unverified.
It's also legally binding, and if they were to lie, then they are culpable. And I guess what I would say, so we are the last people to take them at their face value, the platforms. But they know what is at stake here. So and how would you expect us?
No, Commissioner, please.
Yep.
We are accommodating your evening commitment.
I understand.
So brevity is my expectation. How will you explain or how will you disclose if any of those 10 platforms have provided false or inaccurate information? How will that information be disclosed publicly? How and when will the Prime Minister and the Minister correct the public record?
Well, because
these are unverified.
They're not. I wouldn't characterise them that way.
Well, they're not investigated.
They are being investigated.
They are being investigated.
And they're being tested. I guess I'm not sure what your preoccupation is with
accuracy.
The number.
Accuracy
I believe,
and scrutiny is my preoccupation.
Absolutely. It is ours too.
Well, prudence, a more prudent approach, would have been to better qualify that 4.7 million figure. You must agree with that.
We have done all the due diligence and persistence and in proof that we believe we needed at the time. We pointed out very clearly that this was a point in time. It's not a belief.
You just said it was a belief.
It is not a belief.
The Prime Minister calls it a preliminary analysis. There's been no analysis over that because the ongoing investigations are incomplete.
It was an analysis, Senator. It was preliminary analysis of the responses that we had received from the platforms. So
how did you do that preliminary analysis?
We reviewed the information that they had provided, took into account...
How did you review the information?
If you don't interrupt, the answers will be quicker.
We are accommodating the Commissioner because she has an evening commitment, so brevity is important. Thank you, Senator Green. Thank you, Senator Green.
Courtesy goes both ways.
So that included the teams specifically going through each of the responses that we received from platforms, understanding the explanation they had provided for the numbers that they provided, as well as us going back to existing information that we had from our behind-the-screen report as to the number of accounts that were held by underage users at that point in time, as a way of testing whether the numbers seem to be within the range that we would have expected from each of the platforms. So it was that process.
It's starting to look very slippery.
It's not actually. We're talking about 3 separate processes to make sure that we understood what we expected the number of under 16s to be, using rigor in our research processes and ABS data, and understanding the percentage of young people on each of the platforms. So there were, as I mentioned at the very outset, that there were three different, there was the behind the screen report where we use transparency powers that they need to comply with and be fulsome and true. Through the public compliance process where we ask them to voluntarily put out their compliance plans and their numbers in advance. None of them agreed to do that. So we find ourselves here when they provided this to us. Many of them want this to remain confidential. We, as we said earlier, we will look to see whether or not we can go back and provide these numbers to the committee. There may be a PII as a result. I do not want to undermine the integrity of this ongoing investigation. There are probably 5 different stages that we'll have to go through.
A more prudent approach would have been to say to the Prime Minister, dear Mr Albanese, we're not in a position to provide you with any data because we cannot accurately verify it. We have ongoing investigations underway, and at some future point we expect to be able to give you an accurate and verified figure. You chose not to do that.
Well, what we did say, and what the Prime Minister echoed, was that this was a point in time over a 2-day period, and we said that that is subject to change and will change.
Where did it say it was subject to change?
I think I said that in one of my, at the press conference. That's what I said. You'll probably find that in the
Did the Prime Minister say that? Did the Prime Minister qualify
I said it because the numbers came from our investigation.
Was that in your advice to the Prime Minister or the Minister for Communications?
Well, I said it when I was asked by journalists to explain.
Was that in your advice to them?
I didn't give them advice. I
gave them a number.
Standing at the press conference.
I was standing at the press conference to ask the specific questions. I was standing astride him.
And the Prime Minister issued a written statement which included the 4.7 million figure.
Which we discussed at length with members of the press corps, and I qualified that this constituted a point in time over a 2-day period. This was initial. Things were subject to change. I do think it was important to at least signal to the public that through this first stage that something had been done and something significant had been done. As I said in my opening statement, we're at the hard part now.
Commissioner, I don't think people are disputing that. I think what people are interested to know is the accuracy of the number that was used and how that number was ascertained. The 4.7 million deactivated, removed and restricted accounts, are they exclusively under 16 accounts?
That was what we specified, under 16 accounts, so held by under 16s.
So that is what you are also investigating and verifying?
What we're really focused on now is, now that the 4.7 million have been deactivated or restricted, is whether they are putting the right systems, processes, and technologies in place, including effectively implementing third-party age verification mechanisms to prevent other forms of circumvention, so that they're not letting under 16s back on.
Minister, I am asking you a very clear question. And you are free to take whatever claim of public interest immunity you feel necessary. But I'm asking you, as the Minister at the table, to make available to this committee the data for each of the 10 platforms that was provided to the eSafety Commissioner to meet the 18th of December reporting obligation. Thank you.
Can I just... Sorry. We have taken that on notice.
Thank you.
The number that we spoke about, the details have been given to you about how it was provided, but I just can't...
It hasn't been provided anywhere.
No. It is clear that the Liberal Party that is being run by characters like Senator
Senator
Canavan
Green,
and Senator Antic don't support this policy. You haven't supported it from the beginning. You don't support it now, and you're trying to undermine it by confusing where this information comes from.
Incorrect.
You don't support
That
the policy.
is
You don't.
incorrect.
You don't
We
support. You
absolutely
support
support
platforms,
proper
not
scrutiny and
parents.
proper
And we
transparency.
have taken this action.
Senator Green,
Unfortunately,
that is completely
you are being.
wrong.
Your party is now being
That is
run
completely
by the
wrong.
characters like Senator Antic, Senator Canavan,
completely wrong.
who have come in here and
Senators-
tried to say that they don't support this policy.
Senators,
That's what's happening.
Senators,
That is
come
what's
to order,
happening.
please. I'm going to.
The answer, you have taken my question.
The question's been taken on notice. We need to move on now.
It's very clear to me and everyone else what's happening.
Senators,
It's crystal clear to me.
But
It's
who knows will be
crystal
the Shadow
clear
Minister
that
for
the Prime Minister
Communications
is
on
going to
Friday.
have to
We don't
qualify.
all right, senators, come to order. Senator Roberts.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for appearing again tonight. Let's hurry. Referencing your official statement, Commissioner, in a media release published by the E-Safety Commissioner on January 16, 2026, titled, quote, "Platforms restrict access to 4.7 million under 16 accounts across Australia," end of quote. I do note you did not actually say this reduction was caused by the under 16 ban. Was this reduction caused by the under 16 ban?
Yes, because we asked them as part of the law through the reasonable steps that the first step that they should take was to deactivate or restrict access to all under 16 Australian accounts that were held or had on these platforms.
Thank you. Data from Cloudflare radar traffic overview shows that there was no noticeable reduction in web traffic in Australia on or around December 10 and no noticeable reduction since. Cloudflare tracked data transfer, not users. However, if these were real social media users being locked out in large numbers, the loss of traffic would have shown up. Commissioner, did you conduct an analysis, even a sample, of the accounts provided to you as being under 16 accounts that were closed to see if they were active accounts from under 16s in Australia? Did you or not?
These are active investigations, and Cloudflare does DDoS protection and IP relay. I'm not sure how their analysis is germane to these numbers. What did your technical experts advise you on?
Well, they're saying that basically the data is tracked by Cloudflare and there's no decrease in data.
I don't think they would have been tracking the specific data. From what I understand, we've got a working arrangement with Cloudflare.
They track data transfers, not users.
And
there's been no change in the data transfer.
DDoS attacks and IP relay servers. Would you be aware, Ms. King? Yeah, okay.
Well, could the tech companies, for instance, have included bot accounts, dormant accounts and orphan accounts and said they were Australian under 16 accounts?
Pardon me?
Could the tech companies have, for instance, included bot accounts, orphan accounts, dormant accounts and merely said to you they were Australian under 16 accounts?
That would not have been compliance with the notice.
I know it wouldn't have been, but
Senator
could they have done it?
And they would be risking significant penalties for providing false or misleading information if they had done that.
I appreciate that, but what checks have you done to make sure they haven't done that?
As I said, we've got ongoing investigations into that, into the information that they provided us.
So you're scrutinising what they sent you?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. I've seen multiple reports, some personal testimony and some from tech commentators, which suggest young people found a way around the ban. What percentage of under 16 were on social media before December 10 and what's that figure after December 10?
Percentage of overall 16-year-olds?
Of the total on the internet, total.
Well, we do know that there are 2.5 million 8 to 15-year-olds. It depends how low you went. The data given to us through these legal compulsory notices from the companies was 4.7 million. We know that many young people, some may have none, some may have multiple accounts. So it would be difficult to give you an overall percentage.
So it would be difficult to come up with accurate figures from your investigation once it's completed?
No, it has to do with how the questions were framed in the notice and what we were asking for and what we need to know to understand whether or not they're in compliance with the reasonable steps and the regulatory guidance we put forward. I mean, you could, cut and dice data in many different ways, but what would you want that to tell you? But clearly...
Well, it seems, just moving on, it seems that you've brought in this ban with no actual KPIs to determine success or failure, no measure to track effectiveness of the legislation.
That's not correct. We have a major evaluation. We're about to put the methodological framework, which has been peer-reviewed by how many? 11?
Can you put that on notice? Can you give that
yeah, that's going on the open science framework in a matter of weeks. But just to give you a sense of what it's going to be capturing, it will be looking at evidence about the right age. Are kids sleeping more? Are the quality of their relationships better? Are they out on the sporting fields? Are their NAPLAN scores getting better? Are they
10 weeks?
Oh, no. This will be a 2-year longitudinal study. And what you missed, Senator, is that we've been saying that, this is not instant gratification. This is complex technical regulation. This will take some time to bed down. Like, think about the passage of seatbelt laws in the 1970s. We still have...
Not new to me. I can see it's complex, and we want to make sure it's worth all the pain. That's all. And we want to be reassured that your process of investigation is beyond scrutiny.
Oh, absolutely. But because we're in the process, I mean, I guess I'm kind of coming down to, if we were a law enforcement agency, you probably wouldn't ask about forensic techniques or about numbers that could compromise an investigation. This is the integrity of these regulatory investigations we take very seriously. We're using the tools at our disposal. We're looking beyond where we can get additional information beyond what is provided to us in the information notices.
Okay, thank you. My background is that I come from business where people die if you make decisions without going to the data. And I come to this place and we've got trillions, literally trillions of dollars at stake, and governments, and not just this government, but governments for decades, just completely ignore the data or contradict the data without any raising of an eyelid at all. So I'm intensely concerned about that. That's our number one major problem in governance in this country. Governance is the problem.
Well, listen, this is why we're doing this evaluation. We might not like what it tells us or where it takes us, but we have to follow the evidence and the data.
Because we need to track progress. In the last estimates, I asked a very clear question. How many overseas trips have you taken as E-Safety Commissioner, which you took on notice? Your response was inadequate in that you provided only a list of countries you'd visited at least once. These included Canada, France, Switzerland, Belgium, Ireland, Japan, USA, UK, Germany, Italy, Singapore, Ethiopia, United Arab Emirates, and New Zealand. Can you please provide details of how many times you visited each country? We want to know the total number of visits.
Sure.
Thank you. Why not have online meetings? Why do you need to go in person?
Pardon me, sir?
Why not have online meetings? Why do you need to go in person?
Well, because you do negotiations and you sign MOUs, you build relationships with people. I serve on boards.
What sort of agreements with other nations?
Yes, because the internet is global. I also meet, almost all of my regulatory targets are based overseas. You don't have the product engineers coming over here. I have to go to them to make sure that I'm talking to the right people who understand what their roles and responsibilities are and that they're complying with
Can't
these.
that be done by internet?
We do the vast majority of our engagements by internet.
Okay, thank you. How many overseas trips do you have planned in 2026?
I don't have any planned right now, and I did one last year in 2025.
Okay. What was the total spend of taxpayers' money by the Office of E-Safety in calendar 2025 relating to legal expenses?
Legal expenses?
Yeah.
We can look at that.
So Senator Richard Green, General Counsel, 25-26 was your question?
Yes. Calendar 2025.
I don't have calendar, Senator, but I've got...
What's the latest?
I've got...
Take the financial year.
Financial year.
Yeah.
So this is on external legal in the order of 750,000 24-25, and 25-26 to date is in the order of just under $2 million.
Thank you. Mr. Fleming, it's Fleming, isn't it? You did offer us to have a briefing. We want to take it up. It's just a matter of over the last 3 months there's not been much time, so we will take it up, and I'm very keen to do so. Thank you, and good luck with Italy.
Thank you. See, I'm doing it online.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Senator.
I worked that out.
Thank you, Senator Roberts. Yes, but Senator Henderson, if you're taking a rules point, I'll let you.
Well, I'm couple of very quick
I'm not going to
questions.
rule on that this evening.
Oh, I've got my, Commissioner,
Yes.
look, I just want to be clear. The reason we're asking questions about how many accounts have been deactivated is that we want to test the claim that's been made by yourself and also the Prime Minister. These are legitimate questions. We want to understand the success of the social media ban because the two lots of figures don't reconcile. You've got the very large platforms like Meta, based on what we know publicly, and Snapchat, they've deactivated under 1 million accounts, and yet the balance of those platforms are saying that
You
the
might
total,
be surprised there are some platforms that have very large
well,
numbers.
we might be surprised. So all we're doing is we're seeking to ascertain the factual matters in relation to how many accounts have been deactivated. I understand this is under investigation, but I just refer to the rules of estimates.
Senator Henderson, we
been
don't
taken
need...
on notice.
No, excuse me, I'm asking another question.
Okay, what is the question?
So I'm seeking the information from you in relation to, and Mr Fleming is nodding his head, because secrecy provisions in statutes, it's well established that a secrecy provision in a statute prohibiting the disclosure of particular information does not prevent the provision of that information in a parliamentary forum unless some harm to the public interest must be established, and that would ordinarily be through a public interest immunity claim.
Senator, we would point to 4.61D of the guide, and that talks about investigation processes, and that's the basis on which we say we have a public interest immunity claim.
Well, I don't know that's... Well, I'm afraid that is not an acceptable basis to refuse to answer.
Well,
to provide
ultimately, Senator
information.
Henderson, they've taken the question on notice. When they respond, they will put the grounds for an immunity claim if they've got one, and then the committee will determine that claim.
All right,
So,
thanks,
yeah.
Chair. Can I, was any of the data that was provided to you, did that come with any sort of direction stipulating the data could not be released by the platform?
The platforms were invited to make any confidentiality submissions in relation to the information.
Yep.
I don't have all of the details here, but I can tell you that the majority of the platforms, if not all of them, made claims of confidentiality over the specific individual numbers that they have provided.
Okay, so clearly Meta and Snapchat have
subsequently made their own decision.
Right. So how many of the platforms are still seeking to maintain confidentiality in relation to this number?
We have not gone back and ventilated that issue with them since they made that claim, because, to be clear, the position that we're taking is not based on their confidentiality claim, it's based on a prejudice to investigations claim.
All right, thank you. Thanks very much, Chair.
Thank you, Senator Henderson. I'm now in a position to release the officers and the E-Safety Commissioner. Thank you very much for your evidence here today and for the work that goes into preparing for these hearings, which takes us to the next stage of the process, which is I'm calling officers of Creative Australia to the table, please. All right. I welcome Mr. Adrian Collett, the Chief Executive Officer, and your colleague at the table. Do you wish to make an opening statement?
Senator, thank you. I think we can dispense with an opening statement given the late hour, and I would be happy to answer any questions
That would certainly be my preference, so very much appreciated. I'll now hand the call to Senator Henderson.
Thank you very much, Chair, Mr. Collett.
Good evening.
Sorry, Mrs. Grayson. Good evening to you both. Mr. Collett, will Creative Australia support and constructively participate in the Anti-Semitism Royal Commission if required to do so?
If we're required to do so, of course we would.
So the government is publicly committed to implementing the report by Anti-Semitism Envoy Gillian Siegel. What steps has Creative Australia taken to implement the report's recommendations on anti-Semitism?
Thank you, Senator Henderson. In fact, we met with Special Envoy Siegel for the third time last week, and it was a very constructive meeting. And we, of course, were waiting for the government response since the Special Envoy's recommendations. Now that's been made, the government was very clear that the response to her recommendations on the arts was specifically to point to the establishment of creative workplaces, which happened 2 years ago. And creative workplaces, as you know, was a new initiative under Revive, one of the 4 new bodies we've established under Creative Australia, and their remit is to support and to give advice on establishing fair, safe and respectful workplaces in the creative industries. A number of things...
Actually, Mr. Collett, the Anti-Semitism Envoy's very clear recommendation in her report was that arts bodies should not be funding artists who promote any sort of hate or other anti-Semitic rhetoric towards Jewish Australians or Jews. Now, what are you doing in relation to that? Because over successive estimates, I've raised continuing concerns that you've shown no regard for the funding of artists where they have engaged in hateful behaviour towards Jews, and I am deeply concerned, and this was specifically addressed by the Anti-Semitism Envoy.
Can I answer that in 2 parts? One of my answers will be very familiar to you because, as you say, you've raised this question over the last 2 estimates. But I just want to be clear that the government's response, and we are an agency of government, is to respond to the Special Envoy's recommendations through Creative Workplaces. And Creative Workplaces is doing a lot of work in terms of their response. The first thing they are doing is, as a world first really, for the first time, they have got an extensive survey which has gone out into the field, which also covers demographic information and covers all forms of discrimination. So the first time we will have comprehensive evidence of examples of discrimination, including on discrimination on religious belief or cultures, that we can analyse. That survey completes on the 28th of February, and we hope to have the results available in June. And that will inform policy advice, it will inform future resource materials that we can develop to support the industry, including those people who think they have been discriminated against.
Mr. Collett, I think you might have overlooked another very important part of Ms. Siegel's report, and that was to propose provisions for the cancelling of public funding from cultural institutions or festivals that promote or do not deal effectively with hate or anti-Semitism.
For which we would need evidence. Let me repeat what I've said for the last 2. We are not an investigatory body. We do not fund artists on the basis of religious or backgrounds or cultural beliefs. We fund them exclusively on the merit and impact of their work.
So do you accept that that is an obligation as set out in Gillian Siegel's report?
Do I accept that what's an obligation?
Do you accept that obligation?
Well,
because she's made it very clear that public funding should be cancelled from cultural institutions or festivals that promote or do not deal effectively with hate or anti-Semitism.
Senator, it's a condition of our funding that all recipients comply with all applicable state, territory and Commonwealth work, health and safety and anti-discrimination laws.
No, that's not what this is saying. So do you accept that obligation as set out in Ms Siegel's report? The cancelling of public funding where an organisation such as Creative Australia, which deals with a large portion of arts funding, where Creative Australia does not promote or deal effectively with hate or anti-Semitism. I'm not talking about your legal obligations.
But we have to talk about our legal obligations.
We are
not an investor. We are not qualified to start adjudicating. I'm flattered that you think we might be on what might qualify as anti-Semitic or any other kind of behaviours that are discriminatory on the basis of race or culture or religion. We simply are not qualified, and we don't have that legislative...
Well, there's no... So given that clear principle set out in the Anti-Semitism Envoy's report, do you understand what that means, to deal effectively with hate or anti-Semitism?
My understanding is if there is evidence which is brought up by a suitably qualified agency of unlawful conduct, then we would take that into consideration. But until that happens, we simply cannot start adjudicating on what might be or not be anti-Semitic intention or behaviour.
And that's why Gillian Siegel has come down so heavily on arts organisations, and I would say including Creative Australia. Creative Workplaces was established 2 years ago. The anti-Semitism report was handed down in July last year. So in other words, you're confirming that the government is doing nothing new to implement the Envoy's report, and specifically that you will not implement any recommendations to respond to that very clear principle outlined in her report.
No, I'm not confirming that at all.
Well, what will you do then, Mr Collette?
As pointed to by the government in response to the Special Envoy's recommendations, Creative Workplaces will support the sector in terms of cultural inclusion, health and safety, and they have put the survey into the field with the intention of gathering significant empirical data or evidence.
So what what are you going to do about the notion where taxpayer funds, and what do you say that taxpayer funds should not be used to support anti-Semitic tropes or narratives? What are you going to do about that when you find, as I've raised on many previous occasions, artists which have engaged in hate and anti-Semitism? What's your position about the action that you would take under those circumstances? Has it changed?
If we have evidence of anti-Semitic behaviour which is adjudicated by a qualified body, which is unlawful, then we will consider a proportionate response. But until that happens, we are not going to speculate on what is or isn't anti-Semitic behaviour.
It's got to be adjudicated by a qualified body.
Yes, like the Human Rights Commission or
and found to be unlawful.
A court.
Right. So the only basis on which you say you will act is if there is a court decision or a finding by the Australian Human Rights Commission.
Even if we wish to, we wouldn't have the power to do it. It's not in our legislation.
Right. So now you're saying that even if there was a court decision or a determination by the Human Rights Commission, you wouldn't do anything.
I'm sorry, say that again.
So you're saying that even if you wish to do something, you don't have the power. What about changing your funding agreements?
Well, I think our funding agreements are very clear that you have to comply with all applicable state, territory and federal laws.
What about clauses in your funding agreements that would allow you to cancel or rescind funding if an artist conducts him or herself in a hateful way towards Jews or engages in any other sort of anti-Semitic conduct?
If it is unlawful behaviour, we would consider a proportionate legal response.
Right, so...
All I'm asking, Senator, is you respect the fact that we do not have the legislative authority to work in that way.
So are you seeking further powers? Have you made representations to government that you need further powers? Have you sought advice in relation to varying your funding agreements? What are you doing about this, in other words?
We will ensure that any changes to legislation that could have bearing on this, we will take advice from our colleagues from the Office of the Arts and indeed from the Minister of the Day. But
look, I must say I'm very, very confused by your position. I will continue.
I think it's a very clear position. And just bear with me. At the last two Senate estimates, I've tried to make it very clear what we are charged to do is to support freedom of artistic expression. That is very different from freedom of expression, which is a right that all Australians enjoy and is supported by the law. So we would never, for example, we would never invest in artistic expression that we judge to be anti-Semitic or Islamophobic or in any way ran the risk of giving unlawful expression on the basis of religion or race or many other discriminatory matters. But that is our remit, to support freedom of artistic expression. We are not responsible for the personal views of some of the artists we fund.
So if an artist was to say some deeply offensive remarks in relation to Jewish people, an artist funded by Creative Australia, that did not meet the threshold for hate speech under the law, would you have an issue with that? Would you take any action?
We would deplore anything that is said, and particularly at this time, to further divide our communities, particularly on the basis of race or religion. We deplore that. But the only way we could act on it is if we had evidence, real evidence, that what they said was unlawful.
All right, well, look, what I'm going to ask for is a copy of your standard funding agreement and ask on notice if you have sought any advice in relation to varying your funding agreement so that you do have greater ability to cancel or rescind a grant where one of the artists funded by Creative Australia is acting or behaving in a deeply offensive manner.
Unlawfully.
Have you sought any advice in relation to varying your funding agreements?
We are seeking legal advice on how we can establish more robust expectations, but it is far too early to speculate on that. These are complicated matters, as we all know.
I appreciate that. But, okay, if we could on notice have a copy of the information that you're seeking. Look, I just...
Yeah. I do want to share the call because Senator Roberts is waiting and we've done a block now.
Yeah, sure, Chair.
Thank you, Senator Henderson. Senator Roberts.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for appearing today. Good evening.
Thank you, Senator.
My first question is on behalf of a constituent who provided it, actually, which is a fact check on social media reports that Sarah M. Saleh, S-A-L-E-H, a Palestinian-Australian writer, activist and human rights lawyer, has received an $800,000 grant from Creative Australia. Now, we can't find anything on your website, and it's a larger grant than usual. Do you have any information on this, please?
I don't have specific information. If you just let me speculate for one moment, I think if it was a grant of that size, I would be aware of it. But we will have to take that on notice.
If you could, please.
And check it. You have to remember, Senator, we give about 3,700 grants and contracts a year.
Yeah, we'll ask about more of them. Thank you. In reviewing your grants, we can see a lot that appear to be for the purpose of sending Australians overseas. My question is not criticism at this point. Please explain how much was spent sending artists or students overseas, and what was the cost benefit for taxpayers?
I will have to take that on notice and get you the final figure. But yes, we do invest in programs to send artists overseas. And that is done for the best possible reasons, to support their careers, to make sure that great Australian storytelling and music making is experienced overseas. And I'd ask you to just keep in mind this, particularly in the fields of literature and contemporary music in particular. We are a relatively small English-speaking market, competing increasingly against very large English-speaking markets. So since the establishment of Revive in particular, we've doubled down on supporting Australian artists to establish their careers overseas. And it is a particular moment now in contemporary music, for example, where we find that Australians have never listened to more music because of streaming services, but the Australian artists they are listening to constitute only about 8% of the total of what they're... So we have a big challenge ahead of us. The way we are working in contemporary music in particular is through matched and incentive grants, which I think is a great development in Creative Australia. So we have a very strong eye on export. We will co-invest in an artist and a career with a record label, with other forms of match funding that are trying to break this artist overseas.
Okay, thank you. Khalid Sabsabi and his extremist political views has been an issue for Creative Australia. First he was our Venice Biennale selection, then he wasn't, then he is again, perhaps, then he had a large grant, then it was a $100,000 sorry grant. Can you provide us the latest on Khalid Sabsabi, please? How many, what sort of money has he been given? Is he representing us in any way?
He's representing us, I'm very pleased to say, at the Venice Biennale, which opens in May this year. So yes, you're aware of the history, and we recommissioned Khalid Sabsabi as the artist and Michael D'Agostino as his curator. And we have worked very closely, as we do with all our Venice artists, to support the development of their work.
Thank you. How much money has he received from Creative Australia?
All up, over 20 years.
Something like that, yeah.
We believe he's received slightly in excess of $800,000 over a 20-year period.
Okay.
And that includes his commissions for Venice.
What about the last 12 months?
Well, in the last 12 months, he's received his... sorry, I'm just trying to get the dates right in my head. His commission for Venice, and he's also applied for competitively and received a grant, or actually more accurately, I think the South Australian Gallery did, to ensure that the work he does in Venice is able to be brought home and so that Australians get to enjoy the work as well.
What would that total in the last 12 months?
I'm sorry?
What would that total in the last 12 months?
To get you an exact number, I'd have to take it on notice.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you. I note your continued strong spending on orchestras, theatre and dance. Thank you for that. This question goes to accounting, not to Australian values. You list the Australian Cultural Fund at $13.5 million, which includes several programs for First Nations. Then you have a line item for First Nations of $15.6 million. Is this figure the total spend for dedicated First Nations Aboriginal arts programs, or just an element of it? And if not, what was the total spend on Aboriginal grants?
We can get you that number. I think the number you are alluding to, the $15 million, is under Revive. We established a dedicated First Nations fund with its own First Nations board that has decision-making rights over the spending of those funds.
So you give money to the board and they disperse it?
We have that fund, and the First Nations board, appointed by the minister, has decision-making rights on how that fund is invested. What I'm trying to get for you is I think the total for 24-25 invested in First Nations creative practice and arts was 32.1 million.
32.1, thank you.
Yep.
To give the figure context for those new to the subject, this is out of a total spend on grants of $285 million, correct?
Yes.
And about 74 million for orchestras, including regional, which... Okay, I note
yes,
these...
as a part of the creative sector, the orchestras constitute our biggest area of funding, and that is as part of the National Partnership Framework. So importantly, that is an understanding of co-investment with all the state and territories as well. So we fund each of the state orchestras plus the territory orchestras. We co-invest with the states.
Thank you. I note the Australian Performing Rights Association, APRA, has received around $4.3 million in grants in the last 3 years. Now, APRA had record revenue last year of $740 million, with revenue noticeably outpacing inflation. Isn't it their job to develop local talent and then benefit from increased Australian airplay and the royalties they collect from that talent? They have a great business model here, it seems, because why are taxpayers funding a commercial operation that should be funding new talent themselves?
They do fund indirectly new talent because their business collects receipts for and invests back. Well, the most particular thing we do with APRA is fund Sounds Australia, and that is an organisation which we have funded historically, and we chose to continue that funding even after the establishment of Music Australia, because it is such an effective way of supporting Australian artists get to and benefit from overseas markets.
But can't the Australian Performing Rights Association, which is a commercial entity by the sound of it, why can't they do it on their own? They're developing the talent and they're making money off it.
You'll have to ask them that question.
Oh, but you're giving them money, so you...
We're giving them money because we think it is very good value for money, given the expertise they bring to supporting Australian artists get to overseas markets.
Are you replacing private funding with government funding?
Not at all. In fact, it's a growing, I'm happy to say. So just to get back to first principles, under Revive, our revised legislation allowed us really for the first time to co-invest. And that means co-invest with philanthropic interests, it means co-invest with commercial interests. And that is why, for example, if we want to invest in overseas markets, overseas artists, Australian artists getting overseas, we can ensure that we are co-investing with commercial interests to try and, in fact, drive the value of our government funding further.
Okay, thank you. Only a few more questions to go, quick. Doesn't the music industry need more live venues? Have you done any grants in that area?
Have we done any grants in live venues? I don't think we've done any grants specifically into live venues, no.
Okay, you call these grants investments, yet we don't see any mention of a return on investment. That's how Australia benefited from the spend. How many people attended events you funded? How many people attended events you funded?
We do have that number. I will get it to you. In the last annual report, it was upwards of 14 million.
Okay. Last question, Chair. Do you have any performance metrics to ensure you are spending money where the public want it spent, as evidenced by ticket sales, artwork sales, some tangible KPI?
Yes, we do. If you look at our annual report, we report against KPIs, and attendance at the events we fund is very much part of that. And we will be putting, again because of Revive, we will be putting an even greater emphasis on audience and market development going forward.
Where can we get that figure?
We can get it for you. It is in the annual report last published, but
okay.
we will
So
make sure that we
send us that on notice.
Sure.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Senator Roberts. I'm going to pass the call now to Senator Henderson.
Thank you very much, Chair. Mr Collett, I just wanted to ask whether you've had any discussions with the Minister or his office at all in the wake of the Bondi terrorist attack?
No, I have not had discussions with the Minister or with the office specifically. As I mentioned before, the organisations we have consistently met with are, of course, most recently the Special Envoy for Anti-Semitism, as we discussed. We've also met a number of times with the Centre of Jewish Artists, who are supporting Jewish artists at this time. And we have also met, particularly around their research, with the Centre for Jewish Civilisation, which is part of Monash University, and we were close to their research. And indeed, before we put our survey into the field, we asked them to advise, as we were getting ethics approval for the broader survey, on the kinds of questions we should be asking.
All right. Mr Collett, a front-page report in The Australian on Friday includes, and of course reported in part, The Australian understands the federal government and Ms Siegel's office have put concerns about the arts sector on the back seat until they have implemented changes to security services and started a crackdown on hate groups. Are you able to tell me whether that was true, whether that is true?
I'm unable to tell you whether that's true.
Have you taken any specific action on anti-Semitism in the arts in the wake of Bondi?
The action we've taken is, as I've described, we have met with relevant bodies. We are working with them to develop support materials for the sector. We have a survey in the field to gather evidence of discrimination, and we will do through that all we can to support Jewish artists in the future.
So I want to go to Matt Chun and ask about an essay by Creative Australia. He was a recipient, a grant recipient. I believe he's received around $50,000 based on previous advice you've given us. He published an essay after the Bondi attack, and it's called "We Don't Mourn Fascists." It's deeply offensive. It questioned the innocence of the attack's victims. He called slain Rabbi L.A. Schlanger a Zionist zealot. He invoked anti-Semitic tropes about Zionist media control and supremacy. He wrote about perpetual Jewish victimhood and concluded by picturing a time after Israel, as well as America and Australia's existence. A spokeswoman for Creative Australia said that you were seeking legal advice about recouping the grant money and said this, and I quote, "We are deeply saddened by the terrible events that occurred at Bondi Beach and the pain caused to the Jewish community. We denounce comments made by anyone in the artistic community that are offensive and or create further division at a time when deep reflection and healing is needed." Those comments don't specifically mention anti-Semitism or Mr Chun's comments. Can I please confirm, do you specifically denounce Matt Chun's comments?
As the statement says, anything, particularly at this time, that will cause such deep offence to parts of our community, we deplore. We deplore. I want to correct the record on this. The legal advice we are taking was not about rescinding Mr Chun's grant. His work pertaining to that grant is already completed. It's been done. It's finished. As I said before, the legal advice we were taking was how to strengthen our contracts and understandings in the event that we learn of unlawful activity on the part of someone we have funded.
So can I again ask you, do you specifically denounce Matt Chun's comments?
As I said, we deplore them.
And do you deplore the comments made by Mr Chun?
I have to speak as the CEO of Creative Australia here. And Creative Australia isn't in a position to deplore personal comments by anyone.
But you must operate within a moral compass. You've got a Creative Australia recipient who said the worst things following the Bondi terrorist attack. Why is it that you cannot denounce those specific comments?
Because
which
we
are
don't,
so grotesquely offensive to Jewish Australians
we have
and to
already
all
said
Australians.
how much we deplore those comments being made at this time. And if those comments are proven to be unlawful, we will consider our position.
Okay, I'm going to just... You said we denounce comments made by anyone in the artistic community, so can I just ask you one more time, do you denounce the comments made by Mr Chun?
I'm not in a position to denounce those comments.
Why not? Don't you operate within a moral compass? Don't you understand how deeply offensive this is?
As CEO of Creative...
Calling someone murdered at the Bondi... At Bondi on that horrendous night as I zealot?
I might operate within a moral compass, and Senator, as you've seen, society's moral compasses have been deeply vexatious over coming months and years. Creative Australia operates within a legislative compass.
But you are the CEO of Creative Australia.
And it's as the CEO I'm speaking.
You can denounce comments made by anyone, so you've made a general proposition.
No, I've said we deplore them. I'm not saying anything officially like we denounce them, because that would be an overreach of Creative Australia. And as CEO, I can't do that.
Well, I'm just actually quoting the spokesperson from Creative Australia who used the words, "we denounce comments." I think this is the core of the problem, and this is what Gillian Siegel and so many Australians are concerned about, is when you have artists who say the most horrendous things, so deeply offensive, so deeply anti-Semitic. You as the CEO of the premier arts funding body in this country cannot say, in relation to this person, I denounce those comments.
I cannot say in relation to a specific person, no.
I'm so appalled by that, Mr Collett. I cannot believe it. I cannot believe you. So in the case, and I will just, in the case of Subsidi, and of course he lost his...
Khaled Subsidi, yes.
Khaled Subsidi. Subsabi. He celebrated a leader of a terrorist organisation in artwork. Do you have a problem with that?
It'd be a long reach for me to accept that interpretation.
Well, that's his artwork.
That's your interpretation of his artwork, yes.
Well, I've just had a look at it again.
That artwork, if I'm right, that artwork you're alluding to was a gift of the Australian Cultural Program to the MCA. It's part of its collection for the last decade. It has become controversial because of the current geopolitical situation, but it'd be a long reach for me to interpret that artwork. I'm not a visual arts expert, alas. But I know there has been lots of media commentary on the intention of that artwork, but the interpretation of the question comes from you. It's certainly not my interpretation of that work. I wouldn't venture an interpretation of that work. I'd listen to expert commentators.
So Abdul Rahman Abdullah was removed from the board of the National Gallery of Australia for anti-Semitic comments accusing Israel of genocide and apartheid. So the National Gallery of Australia was able to take a strong stand. I am deeply concerned that Creative Australia appears not to have the ability to take a strong stand when you see the sorts of horrendous comments made by the likes of Matt Chun.
I'm not sure what you mean by a strong stand, other than you're asking for a denouncement. That would be, and we are on the record of denouncing anything that further fuels the terrible conflicts we are seeing in the public square in our community. But I have to be guided by our legislative responsibilities here, which are not about moral compass.
So the moral the moral compass is irrelevant to you?
It's not irrelevant to me, but in terms of Creative Australia, in terms of what steps we can take, we have to act in accordance with our national, federal, state, territory laws.
Look, I'm going to leave my questions here. I'm very concerned by your evidence tonight, but I will follow up with further questions on notice. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Senator Henderson. Senator Ruston, do you have questions?
I have questions for the sport.
Oh, okay, wonderful. Senator Anundraja.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Just want to ask you a few questions about Music Australia. It's been running now for 2 years, could you give us a little bit of information about how it's going, a bit of an update?
Yes, I'm very happy to do that. I think what I'm most welcome about Music Australia, of course, is the additional funds, which will now amount to about $28 million annually, ongoingly. What that has meant for us as an organisation and for Music Australia in particular is that we could increase the amount of individual grants through the processes of Creative Australia, which has been really significant that we could give to artists. But what I'm most welcome about Music Australia is its approach. And I think Writing Australia is now taking a similar approach, that giving grants to artists and arts organisations is vital, taken as read. It's traditional business of the Australia Council, and Music Australia gives us some significantly more funds to do it. But the approach being taken by the Director and advised by the Board is to support the industry that supports artists so that these grants go somewhere. If you like, it's an approach on how to build careers. So a very good example of that is what I mentioned earlier to Senator Henderson, which is our export development grants, where we will work with a record label or a commercial producer to co-invest to get an artist overseas in a timely fashion and ensure they're supported through all these kind of market and industry mechanisms. We also support record labels directly to incentivise them to bring Australian artists through. And there's been also quite a significant shift now to what I would call audience development. We have, as I've said before, a real challenge in this country that there have never been more Australians listening to music, but the percentage of Australian music listened to through our own research has dropped to something like 8%. From, I'd have to take that.
That's okay.
Yeah, on notice. But it is an effect of the streaming services and of course our ability to compete with really large English-speaking markets. One of the examples most recently of our ability to work with, to try and influence Australian listening habits was, of course, with the Ossify project, which has been, by every measure, I think, a real success. And it's a very good example of how you try to influence audience behaviour, and it's based on very good research that Music Australia conducted, which revealed that 8% number, the dropping percentage of the total package, but also importantly, there was a very strong indication in that research that when Australians were aware that they were listening to Australian music, there was a very proud response. Very often they didn't know it was Australian music, but the moment they found out, there was a very strong pride that Australia was producing music of such calibre. So we worked with the contemporary music industry and sector, and most importantly, with artists like Thelma Plum, Kelly Holliday, who just took ownership of this. It was a Music Australia idea, but everyone grabbed it because they could see the advantages if Australian artists knowingly started to Aussify their algo, to choose Australian music, that this would have a compounding effect. And it's too soon to measure the effect of that, but one of the most encouraging signs, of course, was the Triple J Hottest 100. And all credit to Triple J for opening an Oz tab that further supported, but Australian artists' measure of the Hottest 100 had been in rapid decline. And from last year to this, it was featured, I think it was 29, it featured as 54 of the Hottest 100. Kelly Holliday was number 2 on the Hottest 100. We can't say we're directly responsible for that, but it's a nice and encouraging sign of what it means when you start thinking about audience development and incentivising the audience, because this is an even more sustainable way of supporting Australian artists. So I think Music Australia in its 2 years is really finding its feet. It's investing across the industry. It's supporting more Australian artists than ever before, but importantly, it's supporting them to have careers as well as supporting them through grants.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Anandaraja. Senator Henderson.
Just a very, very quick question that I wanted to ask Mr Collett in relation to the website Pearls and Irritations, run by the former Qantas CEO and Labor candidate John Menadue. Your organisation has supported them getting access to taxpayer financial support through the Australian Cultural Fund. There's been, I know, some toing and froing in relation to previous answers to questions on notice, but I just want to quickly draw your attention. On 12th of December, the website published an article that explicitly blames Israel for anti-Semitic attacks on Jews around the world, and which ends with the very disturbing threat that a reckoning is coming and it won't be pleasant. 2 days later, of course, we had the Bondi terrorist attack. Do you still consider that Pearls and Irritations should receive taxpayer support?
Our funding of Pearls and Irritations is very clear for their arts and cultural related content. And we don't fund them directly. It's really important. These are not direct grants. Their applications are listed on the Australian Cultural Fund, which has shown very encouraging growth over the last few years. But the conversation we've had with them is it has to be specifically for arts-related activity. So it has nothing to do with whatever opinions are being expressed elsewhere on the Pearls and Irritations site.
So just going back to my question, do you believe that this website should receive taxpayer support?
I'm not going to venture an opinion on that. It's not what we fund. We fund very specific arts and cultural related activity. Or we don't fund it, but they are able to mount a case for philanthropic support on the ACF, Australian Cultural Fund website.
I'll leave it there. Thank you very much. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Senator Henderson. I think we're in a position now to say thank you to Creative Australia. We appreciate your attendance here today, your evidence, and all the work of you and your officers that sits behind what appears here at the table.
Thank you, Senator.
I would now like to call the officers of Screen Australia to the table, please.
Thank you, Chair.
Welcome to Ms Deirdre Brennan, Chief Executive.
Hello.
That's right. Yes, Chief Executive Officer, and to your colleague. Do you wish to make an opening statement?
Thank you, Chair, and I appreciate the opportunity to appear today and know it's been a very long day for you all. Given the fact that this is my very first estimates appearance, and forgive my croaky voice, I'd like to provide a brief overview of the current focus for Screen Australia. I'm sure you know our screen industry is undergoing profound transformation, impacting content creation, distribution and consumption. And I know we all agree it's vitally important that Australians see ourselves reflected in screen stories across the platforms that we use. And we welcomed the government's introduction of a local content obligation for major streaming services in November last year. This is a significant moment for our sector, supporting screen practitioners to navigate a landscape which has seen more change in the last 5 years than the last 50. But there's more work to do. Formulated through rigorous consultation and analysis, Screen Australia's future-focused approach, enshrined in our new corporate plan released last August, and I urge you to review it, aims to scaffold our industry with innovative programs and adaptive capabilities. Our work is anchored in a new purpose: to build a vibrant, viable screen industry that reflects the depth and diversity of Australian stories and experiences, an industry worth investing in. We will equip the sector by focusing on data-driven, outcome-focused decision-making that emphasises impact and effectiveness over volume of activity. Audience-first, platform-agnostic funding to support projects with clear, measurable connections to Australians. Enterprise sustainability by backing screen businesses and creative talent long term. Strong industry alignment through collaboration, shared objectives, transparent communication and efficiencies. Screen Australia continues to align with the pillars of the National Cultural Policy Revive, while also amplifying our research output, something I know the committee will be interested in the months ahead. This includes a new screen currency report to be released in May this year, which measures value, economic, social and cultural, to better understand and track the public benefit from investing in the screen and games industry. We're also undertaking a production infrastructure and capacity analysis to offer deeper insight into the challenges impacting the growth of the screen workforce. Screen Australia's 24-25 drama report, released last December, showcases Australia's robust and resilient local industry with a record expenditure of $2.7 billion on drama production in Australia. We are pleased to see the interconnected ecosystem of international and local screen production, bringing economic benefit, infrastructure, training and employment opportunities. When it comes to the re-energised area of global production and creative partnerships, Australia brings enormous value to the table that goes well beyond world-class incentives. We see enormous potential for growth and diversification internationally, driven by talent, ideas, and a point of view that has evolved from our distance, our landscape, our First Nation storytellers, and the experiences of the people who make Australia their home. The screen industry showcases Australian values through stories and productions that resonate around the world. Our goal is to guide the agency and the local industry in maximising investment in stories that reflect and connect us, and as we've even discussed today, it's more important than ever. I look forward and I'm excited about continued collaboration with government to fuel a contemporary, creative ecosystem that all Australians can value. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Ms Brennan, for a beautiful opening statement. May I now go to Senator Henderson.
Thank you very much, Chair, and Ms Brennan, good evening. And Ms Brondon, good evening and welcome to Senate Estimates. We are going to be pretty brief, so I will just quickly address the questions that I have. Could I ask about the documentary Silenced? We've discussed this extensively with the ABC. I don't know whether you're aware of that evidence today.
Yes, I watched all day.
All right. How much did you contribute to the production of the film?
And I'm really glad we have the opportunity to provide you a bit more of an oversight on the project. So, Silenced is a feature film documentary with a pre-sale to an Australian broadcaster from renowned Australian documentary producers Stranger Than Fiction. It was funded through our documentary program in August 2024. That nature of the funding was development funding, production funding at a total of 250, with a 20k travel support grant to be able to send the producer, the director and the editor to the Sundance screening to have international sales conversations around the placement of the film.
Did you support the travel of anyone else?
No.
Ms Higgins or Mr.
Purely,
Shiraz?
it is a transactional festival to support the distribution and business growth of the producers. So no, we would not do that. But I thought it was really valuable if we could give you a quick insight into the assessment process and the legal review that applies to a documentary like this.
I'm going to have to be very quick. So look, can I just quickly address my questions,
Yes.
if you don't mind?
I can take that on notice too.
I've raised my concerns in relation to this documentary because the premise of the documentary, the feature film documentary, is the silencing of women using the weaponisation of defamation. Now, in the case of Miss Higgins, two courts found that Miss Higgins had defamed the former WA Senator Linda Reynolds on a number of different occasions over a very horrendous claim that Miss Reynolds and her former Chief of Staff Fiona Brown had covered up a rape in Parliament House. That allegation was false, and there have been a range of various defamations or imputations that were found to have occurred. So there was no silencing at all of Miss Higgins in respect of these matters, but these destroyed the lives of these two women, and they have gone through the most horrendous battle. And I say again, I have great empathy for Miss Higgins in terms of what she endured here in Parliament House, but I'm addressing the premise of this feature film. And I am concerned, I haven't seen the feature film, I haven't seen the script, but I am concerned that there might be a suggestion that effectively defames again Ms Linda Reynolds and Fiona Brown by improperly suggesting that they were somehow involved in silencing Ms Higgins.
I'm very happy to be able to give you reassurance. The film focuses on the work of human rights barrister Jennifer Robinson, and it does refer to particular cases in UK, Mexico, which is the major story in Australia. But it is not the scope of the documentary, and I do not want to enter between discussions or communications between the producer and the parties involved, is very specific to that work. So on a formal side and an assessment side, we were totally satisfied, and this has gone all the way up to our chair and board, by a barrister's opinion that it was appropriate in its content. So I want to assure you that it would not be including some of those areas that you're referencing.
So in terms of the script, have you had that legaled by counsel?
Yes, fully, as part of the assessment process.
And so in your view, there is no suggestion of any wrongdoing by Linda Reynolds or Fiona Brown?
Absolutely not.
There were no allegations raised against Ms Reynolds or Ms Brown, or any allegation that there was any wrongdoing by either of them.
Right.
They're not named in the documentary either, and there's nothing about anybody in government trying to silence Brittany Higgins.
Well, it doesn't mean that there's not defamatory imputations just because they're not named. On notice, could we please have a copy of the script and all correspondence relating to the commissioning of this documentary, please?
Yes, Senator.
Including the considerations about the content and the legal advice that you have received in relation to it.
I think you'll see it's a fully robust process, and we'd be very happy to share that with you.
Thank you. I mean, the promotion of the documentary is very concerning. Why did you, given this is undergot some link with Australia, why did you fund this documentary?
The major link with Australia is about the barrister Jennifer Robinson, who is Australian, and it's about her work in this area and gender-based violence. And given that gender-based violence is a major issue for Australian society, it seemed appropriate.
And so there was no, in terms of what's in the documentary, there's no, well, the promotion talks about the weaponisation of defamation laws, which lead to the silencing of
by
women.
Perpetrators. Yeah,
Sorry?
By perpetrators of violence. That's the basis of Jennifer Robinson's work and her book that the documentary is based on.
All right. Well, look, if we could have a copy of, as I say, the script and all of the relevant correspondence in relation to this documentary, including the initial assessment of the documentary.
Hang on a minute. Hang on a minute.
Senator.
Ms. Brennan, this is your first estimate. This is your first estimate. You do not have to agree to give up a script of a movie to the Senate. That is going to have the effect of chilling, of silencing
Senators will come to order.
artists.
Senator Ananda-Raja, you will come to order.
You cannot have this silencing of artists in this country.
Senators.
This first estimate should not be obligated to meet your requirements.
Senators.
Chair, could we go to a private meeting, please?
I cannot believe that outburst.
Senators.
Someone's got to defend artists.
Could we
Senator Ananda-Raja.
meeting, Chair, for a minute? Can we call a private meeting, please?
Well, I'm reluctant to do that given the time, Senator Henderson.
We're not putting up with
I
that.
understand that. Senator Ananda-Raja, you'll come to order. At this point, unless there is a point of order, which I didn't hear, I'm going to return the call to Senator Henderson.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm sure you're well aware of your obligations under estimates, and thank you very much for your help. I just want to return to another issue, and that is your funding. The Australian has reported statements by the head of the Jewish Australian Screen Fund, Mr Jamie Bielkower, about Screen Australia refusing to support Jewish projects. Can I ask you to respond to that allegation?
Certainly, Senator. The article came out on December 26th. We arranged a conversation with Jump Street Films and founder of Australian Jewish Film Fund on January 5th. I am confident, and I'm very happy to inform the committee that his experiences, I believe, are a perception of potential application processes. But we absolutely have significant evidence of support of Australian Jewish both filmmakers and stories, which I'm very happy to provide to the committee. But we need to lean into this situation, and if we are that inclusive agency that wants to support all Australians, Jamie is helping us now set up two opportunities to converse with a range of Australian Jewish filmmakers in Sydney and Melbourne in March. We're also talking to Shana Levine about cultural competency training, not only for our own staff, but potentially for the industry. So what might have been something that perhaps was not painting Screen Australia in a good light, we get to the bottom of what that is about, and we're actually turning it into a conversation that I think will improve our operations as an agency. And I think even the films that Jamie has shared with us to date have been really insightful. So from a story comes a good outcome.
Well, on notice, if you could just provide any relevant correspondence to show how you are addressing this in terms of the changes that you are making within the agency. Obviously, these are very concerning allegations. I appreciate your evidence this evening. Very cognizant of the time. So, Chair, I'll leave it at that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Senator Henderson.
Thank you.
Thank you to the officials from Screen Australia and Ms Brennan and your evidence. Sorry, and I can't quite... Sorry. Thank you very much for your attendance here, the evidence you've given, and undoubtedly the work that sits behind that evidence. You go with the committee's thanks.
Thank you, Senators.
I'd now like to call officials from Outcome 6. So it's once again members of the department. outcome 6, participation in and access to Australia's arts and culture through developing and supporting cultural expression. Program 6.1, arts and cultural development, including offices of the Office of the Arts, for which we will invite questions. Just give me one moment. Welcome back, Mr. Betts.
Thank you.
I feel the same way. Now, if we're ready to go, given the time, I won't wait long. I will simply hand the call over to Senator Payman.
Thank you so much, Chair. Good evening. I won't take too much time. My line of questioning is around the Commonwealth Indigenous Languages and Arts program. Can the department please outline the total amount of the program's funding allocated in the past 5 financial years to Aboriginal language, culture and heritage programs, and would love if you could provide a year-by-year breakdown of that funding. And you can take it on notice.
Okay, thank you. We might just touch on some of the headlines, and then if there's more detail that sits behind that, it's best provided on notice. We can certainly do that. But the work around Indigenous outcomes in this part of the department is rich and various in its aspects. So maybe Dr. Arnott, you want to lead the charge? Or?
I think that if Mr. Budd's ready, I might hand over to him. But we can, I'm not sure we've got retrospective funding for Indigenous languages and arts in the folder, but we've certainly got current year funding we can provide to you.
Thank you for the question, Senator. Jake Budd, Assistant Secretary, First Nations Policy at the Office of the Arts. Under the ILA program, Indigenous Languages and the Arts, currently in the 25-26 financial year, we'll invest over $47 million. On the part of the question that relates to the last 5 years, we'll have to take that on notice. But in the 2024-25 budget was a significant increase in the program funding, so that's why I'll have to take the previous years on notice. Senator.
So what was the number for 24-25?
Over $47 million.
Over $47 million.
For 25-26.
That was for
26, yeah. And for 24, I'll have to take that component on notice.
That's fine. And if you could also give a breakdown of how much of that funding was awarded to Aboriginal community-controlled organisations, other not-for-profit organisations, and for-profit or commercial entities.
Happy to take that on notice, Senator.
And if the department could provide figures by program and financial year for all 3 categories. How much funding has been directed to Western Australia over the past 5 years, and how much of that funding has been allocated specifically to organisations in the Pilbara region, which is up north?
Yes, I'll have to take that on notice, sorry, Senator.
No
we definitely will be able to do a breakdown, and I mean, we currently under the program fund a number of Indigenous language centres around the country, some of which obviously are in Western Australia, but I will take the specifics on notice.
Thank you. And finally, what proportion of funding for Aboriginal language and cultural programs is provided through short-term or project-based funding, or grants rather, compared to multi-year funding agreements? And I'm curious to understand how the department assesses the impact of like short-term funding on like long-term language maintenance.
So I can answer a component of that question, Senator. So under the program as a whole, we fund, as I mentioned, Indigenous language centres, which has a number of projects which are ongoing over a number of years. The program's been around for some time. Within that, we also, even with projects that and then a proportion of the program we fund one-off projects as part of the large proportion of the program Within that, some of those are also over financial years, so it depends on the nature of the project itself, what the organisation is looking to achieve within that. In some cases, that will be a one-off project. It might be a language revitalisation activity, or it can be language learning over a number of years, but the breakdown between that, more than happy to take that on notice.
Thank you. Thank you. That's all from me. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Senator Payman. Are we in a position to release?
Yeah.
Okay. Understood. Well, thank you to the officials in relation to outcome 6, but some of you will probably be able to go, but the next outcome remains with the department. So we now move to outcome 7, and if we might ask, given the time, we will take the step of combining both outcome 7 and the witnesses of the Australian Sports Commission, because I understand that the the questions will relate to potentially both, and given the time, that seems the most efficient course of action. So if we could have both sets of officials up to the table now, that would be wonderful. Thank you very much.
Have a quiz to find out who knows most about sport.
Yes, I think that's... Yes, we'll be joined by the officials from the Australian Sports Commission when they arrive, but we have the departmental officials here.
What do you mean they're not here at 20 to 11?
Sorry? They're on their way up. They're on their way up.
That was a little presumptive of their part if they'd already gone home.
No, well, they are very committed officers of the
sure
Australian Public Service Royal Commission.
It's so surprised they've been called. I know.
All right. We will now commence the questioning in relation to those two outcomes together. Senator Ruston.
Look, thank you very much. I'm just keen to understand when the NSOs will know about their funding beyond the 30th of June 2026.
Sorry, Senator, I didn't catch that question.
When will the NSOs know of their funding certainty post the 30th of June 2026?
Thank you, Senator. Travis Haslam, First Assistant Secretary, Office of Sport. Funding for national sporting organisations, a portion of that is terminating funding, and it's currently set to terminate, as you note, on 30 June.
I think that's my question.
However, that considerations in relation to that funding will be part of the budget process.
So the timeline for the decisions in relation to this budget are the first week of May 2026, and funding expires on the 30th of June 2026. Is that correct?
Yes, Senator.
Okay. So
I would note Mr Perkins, when he joins us, will be able to...
It's all right. I've got questions for Mr Perkins. Okay. I'm asking them of you at the moment.
There is some of that funding for national sporting organisations and the Australian Sports Commission that is not terminating their funding, and there is a split between terminating funding programs, of which there was additional funding 2 years ago that continues through, as you note, to 30 June, and existing funding that goes to the Sports Commission, some of which is provided to national sporting organisations as well, and that's ongoing funding.
Okay, but the lion's share of the funding to NSOs is uncertain from the 1st to the 30th of June 2026.
Yes, the
Correct.
government committed record investment.
Okay, so have any of the NSOs or other organisations expressed concern about the approaching funding cliff and the uncertainty that they are feeling in relation to funding ongoing?
Senator, that question is better directed to the Australian Sports Commission, who manage that funding.
Have you had any?
I have not.
Okay. So how many athletes currently receive direct athlete support who don't know whether their scholarships will be considered, or is that another matter for...
That program is run by the Australian Sports Commission,
Mr.
Senator.
Perkins. All right, Mr Perkins seems to be at the table, so maybe I'll go to you. So, Mr Perkins, how many athletes have uncertainty in terms of their ongoing scholarships past the 30th of June 2026?
It's a very good question, Senator. Karen Perkins, CEO of the Australian Sports Commission. Good to see everyone. I don't actually have the number of individual grant recipients. It's circa 2,000, but I'll have to take that on notice to come back to you with the exact number.
So, are you concerned in any way about how these athletes are going to make, career and education decisions when there's so much uncertainty about what's going to happen to them post the 30th of June?
Senator, I've been involved in sport for an extremely long time, and what we're dealing with right now is what we've been dealing with for the 40 years of my living memory involved in sport. Government budget cycles don't line up to sporting strategic cycles, and we are constantly engaged in work to try to navigate the challenge of that. The Australian Sports Commission has both core appropriation, which is ongoing, and currently in the vicinity of 45% of that money goes in cash straight to NSOs as part of their grant allocations. Obviously that is only a proportion, a similar size proportion of their overall grant funding. So while there will definitely be a level of navigation that's required to help people understand the right way to approach it, there is no NSO that I'm aware of that would see themselves entirely stopping operations at that time. We're also working very closely with all the NSOs and the system at large, as you'd appreciate the win well and play well strategic frameworks that the industry has aligned to, and we keep them informed about timelines, activity that's underway, and try to ensure that they're comfortable.
Okay, so we'd be really keen to understand how many times in the past we've had a situation where NSOs are in effect sitting 6 or 7 weeks out from their funding, the lion's share of their funding ceasing where they're unaware of it, because according to Mr Haslam they won't know until the budget cycle. So if you could just provide on notice, I don't expect you to have this at the tip of your fingers, how many times in the past that we have had a situation where 6 or 7 weeks out NSOs have got no idea about what their performance funding is, and particularly in regard to the fact that we have an Olympic Games only a few minutes away. So back to the department, have you had any indication about the expectations around maintaining and securing high performance, coaches and technical staff when there is no certainty about funding? I mean, there would be a lot of countries around the world that would have different funding cycles that would be quite happy to take our fantastic coaches and technical staff because we are internationally renowned for them. Are you concerned at all that the inability to be able to provide funding certainty to these organisations may expose them to losing their staff?
Senator, I think as Mr Perkins articulated, the situation in terms of terminating funding as well as ongoing operational funding for the Commission is not new to sport. Certainly.
So with the greatest amount of respect, I didn't ask you that question. I said, are you concerned? I mean, I've already asked Mr Perkins to take on notice how many times they've been left with only 7 weeks' notice. Are you concerned? Have you had any concerns expressed to you by sporting organisations about the losing of coaching or technical professionals?
So the first part of that question invites Mr Haslam to express a personal opinion, which he won't do, but we can talk about representations that he may have received.
Okay, have you had representations?
I haven't received any direct representation,
Have you,
Senator.
Mr Perkins?
No, Senator.
Interesting that they should be talking to me and not you. Quite unusual. Now, my understanding is in terms of Olympic funding cycles, which is obviously much of what this is based around, USA works on quadrennial budget cycles. China has 5-year cycles. And these countries have got billions of dollars worth of funding. I mean, maybe this is a question to you, Mr Perkins, because with your experience in the sporting field, is this the kind of thing that would normally cause concern to sporting organisations, that they're competing against countries that have got a great deal of certainty and a great deal of money, and Australia, the expectation around Australian athletes is very high, and rightly so. They've been brilliant. But are you concerned, or is that in your experience as an Olympic athlete particularly, are you concerned that we're at a disadvantage because we have no funding certainty on the eve of funding running out?
Senator, as I mentioned earlier, this is not an unusual or new circumstance. So for most of our sports, they have clear what it takes to win strategies that run right through to and beyond the Los Angeles cycle, which will be renewed and reviewed going into the Brisbane 32 cycle. And those sports are well aware that the budget process is in play. There is numerous entities that are making representations to government around what that funding should look like, as we are too. I think it's worth recognising that while uncertainty does create an environment where people can make interesting choices at times, the Australian sporting system is extremely well funded and supported, and our athletes and our coaches are aware that the work is being done to give them certainty as soon as possible.
Sure. So what timeline has the department given you in relation to your understanding about NSO funding?
Senator, this is part of the budget process, so
okay.
We're not special. We're part of the standard budget process. We will provide MPPs in relation to our terminating measures when ERC calls for them, and decisions will be made in the fullness of time by government.
Okay, and so you've given evidence, just to be clear, that no sporting organisations have raised any concern with you around this uncertainty around funding?
Senator, I've had multiple conversations with sports wanting to know where the process is up to and what work is being done and how that representation is being made. And I've not personally had any sports then subsequently come to me and reflect that the uncertainty that's coming up is causing them to have staff at risk or future programs at risk. They're well informed, and we support them where we can.
Have they raised concerns with you on any matter that relates to their funding uncertainty going forward?
No one has said to me they're concerned. They want to know what we're doing about it.
You do realise that you're on the public record saying this. You have to tell the truth.
So we've been here before, Senator. We've had this conversation before, and
okay, that's fine.
And what I'd probably highlight is that I can only reflect the conversations that I've had. I have not had a conversation with any other member of my senior executive team who manage grants to hear from them that they have sports who are particularly agitated or concerned. But every budget cycle we go through this.
Okay, fine. Well, you've had said what you've said. So obviously we're only 6 years away now to Brisbane 32. So your high performance sports strategy identifies long-term athlete development pathways critical to success. That's one of your documents. So I'm just really keen how you reconcile that and how you implement a strategy like that when NSOs don't have any funding certainty past the 30th of June. What's the expectation on you to be able to deal with that?
Oh, there's an enormous amount of expectation on me within the system to deal with that, I can assure you. And that is fine. That is the Australian Sports Commission's role that it plays as the Commonwealth corporate entity that distributes the funding from budget measures that the federal government chooses to provide. I think the conversation that I keep having with sports is providing them with greater detail and understanding of actually where our budgets come from, how they're distributed, and what the gap between certainty and uncertainty. And while the May 24 budget uplift that we received in funding into the high performance system was significant and shifted that balance, the terminating measures accounting for circa 60% of cash grants to sport, the remaining circa 40, and I can get you the exact numbers. I appreciate that I'm being a bit vague. I don't have the exact percentages in front of me and the numbers, but I can get that.
Yeah,
but Senator, that 43% is part of our core appropriation. That money is ongoing in perpetuity. I do not have any concern that the base funding that enables us to continue to support the life of sports is able to be provided. It does not align to the ambition that we have within the sports strategy within our industry, hence the reason why terminating measures is something that we pursue.
Yeah, look, and absolutely hear what you're saying, but I mean, it's not really the point. The point here is there's an expectation in the lead up to 2032 that we're going to give our athletes the best possible runway. And there's been a lot of talk about, the green and gold runway and, the legacy of pre-games legacy, the post-games legacy and the like. And I accept the fact that, there is a certain amount of, base funding that, ticks over. But the reality is if we want to really expect to be able to deliver, obviously we need to make sure that we've got the resources in place for our athletes to be able to do it, and one of them is certainty. And I mean, you, as I said, you've performed at the very highest level when it comes to sport in the world. So I'm interested, have you raised concerns with the Minister that this uncertainty so close to this funding running out has had any detrimental effect on, or has a potential to have a detrimental effect, or are you completely and utterly convinced that there is no issue at all?
I don't believe I've said there's no issue, Senator, and I
appreciate
that everybody reacts differently to navigating uncertainty when that uncertainty is presented. As it stands right at this moment in time, the Australian high-performance sports system is the best funded government-funded sports system in the world, bar very few, and China and a couple of other countries like that, which of course we would not want to compete against. But in general terms, certainly those countries that we benchmark ourselves across, we are the highest funded.
We don't want to compete against China. I'm sorry, could you unpack that?
No, benchmark ourselves against how the system is delivered and what it's able to provide. We would. There is not. There's not a conversation within our sports system that we would want to replicate the way China goes about training and delivering athletic performance, Senator. So it's a very different conversation.
US? I mean, like, I suppose, and this is putting you on a spot. I absolutely get it. I suppose I'm just really...
Within the Olympic and Paralympic frame, we're better funded than the US, Senator.
So the fact that we're running out of funding on the 30th of June, we have no certainty past the 30th of June, is better than what happens in the US.
They're different environments delivering different outcomes, but the services that we provide and the funding that's provided to the 46 high-performance programs that are going to be continuing to work very hard to deliver athletic performance in the lead up to Los Angeles and Brisbane, are aware of the work that's being done. Of course, there would be those who may not be comfortable with uncertainty, but I can't speak for those. All I can tell you is that I've not had anyone come directly to me and say, we're panicking, we're in trouble. We're communicating openly with sports. They understand the work that's being done. They understand the program of delivery and the level of certainty that we can provide while the terminating budget measures are being addressed more broadly.
Okay, well, I'll make sure that I'm
catching up with all the CEOs on the 23rd.
Okay,
well, so I'm sure they'll let me know.
Well, I
might directly ask them for you, Senator.
Do, please, because I think you might need to be chastised for talking to me and not talking to you. It seems a little silly for them to be doing, given that I don't have the money and you have greater access. So can I just ask, what is the total budget allocation for the major sporting events legacy framework for 25-26?
Senator, there's not an allocation per se for the major sport event legacy framework. That's a policy framework that guides the types of things government is interested in. There is direct investment in events themselves, and the government has made investments directly in events. Within those events, the legacy from those is considered as part of that, but there's not a specific allocation to a framework. The framework guides government consideration, as does Sport Horizon.
Okay. So at the moment, we've got a major sporting events legacy framework, and all that has been allocated within that are, well, is it the Canoe Slalom World Championships, the Men's Rugby World Cup, Women's Rugby World Cup? Is there anything else that's got any money?
So Senator Lisa Rowder, Acting Deputy Secretary for Sports Territories and Regions. So around $130 million has been invested by the government in major sporting events between 2022-23, running up to 2029-30. Let's
be clear here. I asked you what the total budget allocation for major sporting events legacy framework for the financial year 25-26. What is that? Mr. Hasman just told me we don't have that. So I'm keen to understand what money has actually been, what events have had money allocated to them in that financial year.
Senator, again, thanks for clarity. There is not an allocation to the legacy framework. There is allocation specifically to events. Recent allocations, as Ms Rauter indicated, include the Rugby World Cup in 27 and 29, of which there's $90 million allocated. More recently, allocations include the Women's Softball World Cup Finals, which is $750,000 in 25-26. There's been investments in the Women's Asian Cup, which starts in less than a month, Senator, as well, which was $15 million. Other events that we can talk to from government investment perspective is the ICF Slalom World Championships, which were held last year, which was $1.2 million. The Virtus World Athletics Championships, which was $0.46 million. The 2025 World Boccia Challenger event held here in Canberra at the AIS, $0.25 million. The 2027 Netball World Cup is $6 million over 4 years. There's also been allocations to the 2029 World Masters Games, which is $16.3 million, and the Rugby World Cups I've already noted as well.
And they were all allocated this year.
Thank you, Senators. Sorry, I'm going to step across now. Thank you, Senator Ruston. I appreciate that.
Ask on notice then, please?
You may put some questions on notice, but we've now ticked over to 11:01, which means we are adjourning. Yes.
No, well, you're not allowed to talk, so you're not allowed to talk.
Can we, I was just going to say, can we thank the Australian Sports Commission for their updates on the Winter Olympics and wish all of our athletes the best, which I'm sure you would concur with, Senator Ruston.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Minister. At the conclusion of the hearing, that concludes today's hearing. Thank you all witnesses who appeared and to Hansard Broadcasting for their assistance. Thank you to all the people who sit behind the scenes and make days like today happen, and their long days and difficult days, so we express our appreciation for their work. I remind Senators that the committee has agreed that any written questions on notice should be lodged with the Secretariat by 20 February 2026, and the committee stands adjourned. Thank you.